Okay, we're back. Next up is William Roberts. Hope we didn't lose people. Matt Bill Strumbus. Sydney Delanois.
Hi, I'm here. 1 second.
Sydney, if I mispronounced your name, please correct me.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Hi, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, Representative Scott, Senator Sampson, and members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for being here. It's been a long day. My name is Sydney Delanois, and I'm a current resident of New Haven and a graduate student at UConn School of Social Work. I'm here in support of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, and would like to highly encourage you to expand the protections to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. My most recent apartment I've lived in for the past 2 years and was very difficult to find. I'm a student. I'm required to do an unpaid internship to finish my degree and work on top of everything else to be able to afford where I live. I've heard a lot today that leases are contracts, that if tenants want something different, they need to negotiate, or that some landlords have tenants that have no issues. But it's impossible to ignore the uneven power dynamics that exist when it comes to renting. My current lease agreement was a template and left very few rights for tenants. My landlord refused to edit the template or add repairs they promised to do to the apartment before I moved in. And even when I asked, I did not have much of a choice when accepting the lease. I needed a place to live that I could afford, and I had to take their word on that they would do what they promised and do my best not to make any mistake that would cause an unfair charge or give them reason to be upset with me. You can't negotiate details in a lease when the number of affordable units in a state are low. And my landlord has never responded to me raising an issue respectfully, only with annoyance, exasperation, if that, even when there are valid reasons. In my years of renting, I've learned to evaluate the issues I should bring up, because every time I advocate on my behalf of an issue and every time I advocate on behalf of an issue that I experience in my apartment, I put myself at risk of retaliation from landlords that have power to refuse to renew my lease if they decide I'm too much of a nuisance. And I have privilege because of my identities that not all my neighbors have. Almost 1/3 of Connecticut residents are renters. 59% of the state's Black households and 33% of Latino households live in rented homes, and 58% of Connecticut households that make under $50,000 a year live in rented apartments. Black and Latino tenants, especially women, are significantly more likely than other tenants to face eviction in Connecticut. Evictions stay on your record, and they have negative impacts on employment, mental and physical health, increase housing security, and increase homelessness. I want to be able to put down roots in my community, to stay in Connecticut without the fear of losing my apartment for arbitrary reasons, and I want neighbors to have the same rights. Just cause evictions will strengthen our communities and provide protections that we need. I strongly support SB 143, an act concerning eviction for cause, and encourage that you do as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sydney, I don't see any questions for you. Delaney Hall. Come on up.
I'm Senator Moore and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Delaney Hall. I'm a resident of Bridgeport and a member of Make the Road Connecticut. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. I support this bill because I am a victim of eviction. I was evicted in 2022 because of racism. The landlord retaliated against me because I made a complaint about loud music late at night. This was my first time complaining about this situation, because I was extremely exhausted from work and was supposed to go back to work and needed to catch some sleep. This being said, she decided to raise the rent without giving me a new lease. She dropped a paper in my mailbox stating that she was raising the rent. I spoke to a paralegal, and it was suggested that the landlord was not supposed to raise my rent until she dealt with the fixtures and rodents at the apartment. She never fixed anything, and I decided to stop paying rent due to living paycheck to paycheck, so in order to save up, I had to stop paying rent. She took me to court, and I was forced to leave 2 weeks later. This would never have happened if she would have spoken to the other tenants, but like she mentioned, they are Spanish and I don't want them to retaliate on me. Meaning that as a Black woman, I shouldn't retaliate on her as well. This made me go through a rough patch in between working and looking for somewhere to live with my kids. I only had 2 weeks to look for a new home. This made my kids and I feel devastated and miserable. This is why today I am here supporting this bill. Black renters in Connecticut are over 3 times more likely than white renters to face eviction, and Hispanic and Latino renters are over 2 times more likely to face eviction than white renters. For these reasons, I strongly support Senate Bill 143 and act concerning evictions for just cause. Thank you. Delaney Hall, Bridgeport.
Thank you for that testimony. Next is Jim McCorkle. Are you there, Jim?
I've asked Jim to unmute.
Jim, would you unmute? I will come back to you. Jeffrey Kaplan.
Good evening, members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak in opposition to SB 143. My name is Jeffrey Kaplan. I'm a third-generation housing provider up in North Central Connecticut. I'm hearing a lot of talk about how lapse of time evictions are without cause, and I can promise you that no landlord is just doing lapse of time evictions without cause. Evictions are very expensive. We lose rent when we're going through that process because oftentimes the tenants, they're almost always not paying during that time. We get excessive wear and tear on the building when evictions are going on. And also there's legal fees that add up as well. So there's a big expense there. Most often it's $10,000 plus is the cost that we have to absorb each time we do an eviction. So there's good reason, but in my experience, there's usually 2 causes for a lapse of time eviction. One is that the landlord needs to do major renovations to the building. So for example, if you got to upgrade the sewage, you got to upgrade the electrical systems, you got to open up many walls, you got to do major renovations. You got to go through several units to do this. It's basically impossible to do these types of major upgrades when you've got people in possession. It would be disruptive, and you just can't do it. As well as you got to economize on materials. You need to hire contractors who are able to do all of these at one time. So you can, so it's not a burdensome experience. And also, yes, that does bring higher rents, but you're also refreshing the housing stock. So you don't have buildings that are deteriorating and getting blighted and eventually being put out of use. The second reason for lapse of time evictions is you have bad actor tenants. So whenever I put new tenants into my buildings, I basically give them 3 rules. I ask them to pay their rent on time, to be a good neighbor, and keep the property in good condition. If you can do those 3 things, we're going to have a great relationship. You're going to love renting from me, and I'm going to take great care of you and be very responsive to your needs. And I want my tenants to have a good experience there. So sometimes you've got people who have legitimately bad neighbors, and I don't want good tenants to be run off by bad neighbors. The type of bad neighbors that you get are people who overcrowd units. They put more people in the unit than who signed the lease. People that I don't know who they are. They might have criminal records. They might be sex offenders. For whatever reason, they chose to not declare those people on the lease. They ended up living there. They make other people feel uncomfortable. You've got people hogging common areas. They're hoarding their belongings in the property. They're violating fire code. They're inviting pests into the units. They're acting in ways that are unsavory and making people feel unsafe. They're generating odors such as smoke, animal feces. They've got animals that we don't allow in there, such as large pit bulls. Lots of different things that you can get that would cause somebody to be a bad neighbor. So for that reason, we use lapse of time evictions to remove the bad tenants. And I choose to make a calculation where if we're going to spend $10,000+ to evict somebody and throw out the trash and do all the things that that entails after they're gone, there's a benefit to the house.
Your time has
To the
expired. Do you mind summarizing, please?
Sure, and just so bad actor tenants. And one final thought, though, you're going to end up clogging up the housing court system by doing this because, as Senator Sampson has mentioned many times, for cause evictions, it's not simply pointing something on the lease and saying you violated it. It's a process to document, and I'm not law enforcement. I shouldn't have to build a dossier every time I have to evict somebody for cause. It's a clean way for us to control our properties, get bad actor tenants out, and also make necessary repairs to refresh the housing stock. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I welcome any questions.
I thank you for your testimony. I see no questions. Brian Smith is next. I'm gonna hold you to that, Brian. I'm gonna start charging you.
And this was the only one I knew I would deliver on somebody's behalf tonight. Brian really wanted to be here. He has been a fighter for this movement for years, but he is
All right, you're using up your 3 minutes there, buddy.
Good evening, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Brian Smith. I am a Windsor resident and the chapter vice president of the Windsor Tenant Union, and I'm here in support of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, amended to include 1 to 4 unit multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. Growing up in Newington during the 60s and 70s, I noticed that one person working full-time at even your average job could afford a modest single-family home to call their own, through which they could build equity. In my opinion, that is or was the definition of the American dream. Now, 50 years later, it takes a 2-income household just to pay for a rental apartment that in most cases is not even a desirable place to live. I have never seen it so hard to get an apartment in this area before. The tenants who are struggling to get by will be trapped in this cycle for their whole lives, never able to save enough money to get their own place. No American dream for them, no matter how hard they work, trapped in overpriced rental housing. Why would we want to add to our homelessness problem by evicting people for no cause? Senator Sampson, how can you still be advocating trickle-down economics and free markets that only enrich those who have more than they will ever need? Have you ever once done anything to help the working poor? I live in a housing authority. Theoretically, we are supposed to have extra protections, but since Windsor is the worst housing authority in the state, they just don't care. They have always threatened us with non-renewal, but until recently, never actually done it. Now, if you're active in the tenant union here, you're being told to get out. It's being done merely for having the courage to speak out. The tenants here are poor, they're sick, they're elderly. Almost all of us are disabled. How about giving the people who need protection this little bit of help? If Just Cause is expanded, those of us who most desperately need protection will be more likely to be aware of it and more likely to be able to enforce the rights we already have. And those who aren't protected already will be able to keep themselves safe from the kind of intimidation so many of us are facing. I strongly feel that it is not too much to ask. Please don't let this legislation die in committee. Please take a vote on our bill. We need your help. Thank you. Brian Smith.
So I want to thank you for that testimony, but we try not to call out individual legislators. I know it was, so this is the message for him, for the future. We're all here to hear our opinions. We try not to, we don't want to call out legislators, even if they differ with our opinion.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. I'll fight for Senator Sampson not being dragged. If anybody's going to do it, it'll be me. All right. I don't know. I'm surprised he didn't say something. All right. Well, thank you. Alexander Katronis. Please say that name for me. I know I didn't do it any justice.
Katronis.
Katronis.
There you go.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Katronis. I am director of the Naugatuck Valley Project, which has 23 member affiliate organizations. That includes labor unions, churches, a mosque, and housing cooperatives that we actually developed 33 years ago. We're based in Waterbury, and we operate in 15 municipalities in the valley. And I'm speaking in favor of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for just cause, and in favor of a provision that includes properties that are 1 to 4 unit buildings, except those owner occupied. I will just read out some statistics from the region. I think story after story has been told, and what that allows us to do is actually, I think, imagine and visualize what some of the statistics mean when they're presented. And since we operate in a part of the state that has received a little bit of testimony today, but not a whole lot, I want to again share statistics about that. So, according to the city of Waterbury in 2019, 59% of Waterbury renters were cost burdened. That's 2019. And we know how bad the housing crisis has been getting in the years since. Over 80% of the units in Waterbury were built before 1970, and 55% of the housing stock was built before 1955, which means housing stock is likely in chronic disrepair. And if you drive through Waterbury or walk through Waterbury, you know that's not more than likely it is the case. I bring up these statistics because we've had this discussion over and over again tonight about how pervasive health and safety issues are in housing in apartments. And so if we can see or imagine 55% of the housing stock built before 1955 and not having the necessary staff, inspectors, and so forth, and people being afraid to speak up about the health and safety issues in their living space, I mean, we have a huge problem in Waterbury. So to go beyond that, approximately 20% of the units are 3 to 4 unit buildings. Almost 40% are single family residential. I bring that up also because industry analysts nationwide have predicted that institutional investors, meaning hedge funds, private equity firms, will control 40% of U.S. single-family rental homes by 2030. So these are regions that are being targeted. This is the type of housing stock that's being targeted, and that's why the just cause needs to cover all units except those owner occupied. And except those owner occupied applies to when we're talking about, again, institutional investors, and they're making their way into the valley, and the people that we talk to in the valley up and down are people who have moved from New York, from Bridgeport, from New Haven, from elsewhere in the state, and now they're experiencing big rent increases in the region as well. I'll quote the city of Waterbury's housing plan, 2022 to 2027. It states, and this is from adopted July 13th, 2022, quote, "One of the more pressing and persistent issues in Waterbury is an aging code and code deficient housing stock. As
Your 3 minutes are up. Do you mind summarizing?
Sure.
Thanks.
As previously mentioned in this plan's discussion of housing data, over 80% of Waterbury's housing stock was built before 1970. Older housing stock is typically associated with increased maintenance and repair costs, health risks for occupants from outdated building materials such as lead paint, and inaccessibility for elderly residents. Much of the aging housing stock can be considered substandard, which is a broad term used to characterize housing that is not up to code, or in extreme cases includes any condition that endangers life, safety, or welfare of the occupants." This is from the city of Waterbury. And if residents don't feel safe to speak up and to file complaints or put up their grievances around housing stock that is summarized this way by the city of Waterbury because of no fault evictions, we need to reverse that dynamic and reverse that situation and change that reality so that we can address health and safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see any questions. Ann Minuski? Holly Hackett?
Representative Khan and the housing.
Allison Rivera? Oh, Holly's on.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Holly, we're having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Holly, we can't hear you.
Trying to switch. Can you hear me okay
We
now?
can't hear you.
Oh, oy. Okay.
Your mic's on.
I'm trying to get it now. Can you hear me okay now?
The volume is very low.
I know, I don't know what the problem is. My apologies.
You want to go out and come back in?
I can try that. Yes, I'm
We'll
sorry.
take Allison Rivera while you do that.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Allison. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm not going to read my scripted written testimony that I had planned because after hearing a lot of the misinformation, such as I am a landlord, I was also a renter at one time. So I respect both sides of the aisle. And I've been doing this for over 3 decades with my husband. And we were not able to get PPP funds during the moratorium. So that I'm not aware of any landlords that actually were able to get PPP funds. So we had to apply for loans that we were not able to get because that was happening at that time. We also were not able to get the Unite CT money for the tenants that did not fill out their forms. We were not able to fill their forms out. They did not sign them. We were not able to evict any that we did get, maybe 1 or 2. Once you accepted Unite CT money, you were not able to evict. So that is also not true for some previous testimonies that I've heard. I wanted to clarify that. We used our own money to pay up until now. I know last year I was on here during the last legislative session, and I explained how we have worked many years and for the properties that we have saved money. We had our kids' college savings, and since COVID had to use those funds to avoid foreclosures and other issues that we had due to people not paying rent for up to a year. So I had to basically start over. I find it very insulting to hear some of the testimonies from the supporting side that we should just try to have a new profession. Some of us are in our 50s, our 60s, our 70s. We all have stories. We all come from working families, from immigrants. We all have a story, and we all work hard on both sides of the aisle. There are people that need to move on. If you're not happy in a home that we or others provide, there's no sense forcing something that doesn't work. It should be a blessing to open your eyes. If you need to move on to another place, whether it be another house, another city, whatever it is for anyone, even if I wasn't happy living in a home that I own, I've moved before, not being happy in a place. I've sold a house. We've had to make our own. It's an incentive also for people to not rely on maybe government funds or whatever it is, a job if you want to improve something. Lots of stories. These are blanket policies.
You're up and your time
Okay.
is expired. Do you mind summarizing, please?
I will summarize. I had a timer on and I lost it. I'm sorry. These blanket policies or these bills, they do not work. They do not speak for all of us. And it's very, very frustrating to keep hearing, some people say they didn't want to be there, whether it was a senator I heard before. None of us want to be here. Whether we're a landlord, a tenant, we're tired. We want to take this time at this night. I'm actually in my office. I do work during the day with tenants that I have good relationships with most, but there's some people that just don't work for whatever reason sometimes. And we provide sometimes holiday meals, clothes for their kids. We do care. I don't want to hear from
I'm going to
other
ask you to
people.
wrap up, please.
Yep, that's it. I just wanted to clarify that we are not, profits over people. That is not who we are. There's a very few
Thank you.
select of landlords, just like the tenants. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Holly. Are you able to come on?
Can you guys hear me okay now?
You're there. I can see you. Let's
Okay,
see
but-
about voice.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, no.
We cannot hear you, Holly.
Oh. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I can't hear you guys, but I'll try to fix that later. My
Okay.
apologies. Good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Holly Hackett. I am a resident of Branford and the Vice President of the Parkside Village 2 Tenants Union, a chapter of Connecticut Tenants Union. I support SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause. Parkside Village 2 is a housing authority-owned complex for the elderly and disabled. None of us knew that there was already a just cause law protecting us. I know this because the previous management company had tried to evict someone in our complex without cause. Thankfully, she was able to fight it successfully. However, fear spread through the complex and everyone was frightened of this happening to them too. My hope is when this act becomes law and just cause protections become universal, more people will know they are protected as a result. It is a false narrative that just cause will make it too difficult for landlords to evict bad tenants. If a tenant is doing something in violation of their lease or the law, they can still be evicted or asked to leave at the end of their lease. Renters deserve to be able to establish roots that they are doing everything correctly. Our children deserve the right to stay in their school districts with their friends. They also deserve the utmost protection from no-fault evictions based upon a predatory landlord wanting people to move in who can pay a higher rent in 2 to 3 years, as we've heard the opposition state. Another false narrative by the opposition is that the eviction process will take too long without the option of lapse of time or no-fault eviction. The average time for cause evictions was 31 days in Connecticut between 2017 and 2023. The average time for no-fault evictions was 35 days during the same period. So just cause protections do not add burdens to landlords. They do allow renters the ability to establish roots without fear of discriminatory or retaliatory displacement. I'm also a member of Mothers and Others for Justice. We fight for racial and social justice rights and in all policies. We fight for all who are marginalized, especially in the Black and Brown communities. It angers me that people in urban centers are the most hurt by no-fault evictions, usually due to gentrification. Many businesses, even across our state, towns, and cities, have diversity, equity, and inclusion positions. Yet when it comes to the most basic need in life, a roof over your head, we are still perpetuating racism, classism, and ableism. I am asking you to please support SB 143 to try to combat some of the racist, classist, existing policies taken against some of the most marginalized members of our Connecticut community. It is now time to join together to rewrite the rules and policies so that families, children, and working people can remain in our neighborhoods. Please support SB 143, an act concerning evictions for a cause that has a zero fiscal note attached and will lead to housing stability, trust, and safety
minutes
among
have
neighbors
expired.
and improved
Do you mind
unity in our
summarizing?
neighborhoods. We in Connecticut should and can do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but thank you. Next is Thomas Birmingham.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Thomas.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Birmingham. I'm a resident of New Haven, and I'm a journalist that has covered housing for several years. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, but it absolutely needs to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. I want to start by going back to testimony from earlier today that has stuck with me in the many hours since then. In explaining their opposition to the bill, certain landlords attempted to wave away the impact of no-cause evictions by citing data that showed the evictions only make up around 10% of all eviction filings. This data came from CT Fair Housing Center. And what is hidden in that number is that 10% represents over 2,000 households annually, thousands of human beings. And I'd certainly hope that all the members of this committee would agree that something that impacts thousands of CT residents annually should be worthy of your consideration, and more importantly, your action. But let's look at the data these landlords cited even further. This same data shows that no-cause evictions have increased 22% since 2019, while evictions overall have increased only 8%. And in some cities, the data shows no-cause evictions are skyrocketing. In New Haven, they have increased 135% since 2019. Now is the time to act on this rapidly growing issue. Secondly, in my work as a journalist, I've spent a lot of time covering tenant unions. In 2022, New Haven passed its tenant union ordinance, giving renters throughout the city a legal channel to organize. But without the protections this bill would provide, and again, it should be expanded to include 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, this ordinance cannot fully be realized. If your landlord doesn't even need a reason to displace you when your lease expires, this obviously makes the average tenant less inclined to rock the boat by advocating for their rights and their stability, even though the law already allows them to do so. This bill is therefore an essential step in giving tenants the opportunity to fully embrace their already existing municipal rights. And finally, there's been a lot of talk about this bill taking away a landlord's right to do whatever they want with their private property. And to that I say, great. There's already many laws dictating that property owners can't do whatever they want, such as laws saying that you can't just ignore hazardous conditions in your properties. So if you as a landlord are unhappy about laws preventing you from doing whatever you want, or God forbid, how difficult evicting tenants with cause is, you are more than welcome to use your American freedom to stop being a landlord at any time. Find another way to make money. People do not have the freedom, however, to suddenly stop needing shelter. Shelter is a basic human need, and all this law says that if you're going to take a basic human need away from somebody, you better have a reason. So please support Senate Bill 143 and not concerning evictions for cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for your testimony. I don't see any questions for you. Next is Seth Freeman.
Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Seth Freeman. I'm a resident of West Hartford, president of Congress of Connecticut Community Colleges, 4Cs, and proud member of Connecticut for All. I'm testifying today on behalf of CBAC, State Employees Bargaining Agent Coalition, representing thousands of state workers across our state. Our CBAC union supports Senate Bill 143 to provide needed protections for renters. We support this bill because we understand that every person needs protections in the workplace, but also need protections in our communities and in our housing. Just as we need protections from bosses and managers who would discriminate against us or punish us for advocating for our rights at the workplace, we need protections from bad property owners and landlords who would discriminate against us or punish us for advocating for safe, healthy, and affordable housing. My union, 4Cs, represents community college faculty and staff across our 12 community college campuses. I teach at CG State Capitol in Hartford. In our community colleges, our workforce, and particularly our students, are deeply impacted by housing insecurity. As faculty, we know that housing insecurity and food insecurity are non-academic barriers that impede our students' abilities to be successful and attain a college degree. 4C's union supports Senate Bill 143 because we know this bill will provide important protections for our workforce and the students we serve in our community colleges. Lastly, as an individual, I currently reside in West Hartford, and I am a property owner in Hartford where I own a 2-family property. As a landlord, I support expanding just cause eviction protections because I believe renters deserve the same rights and the same dignity that I am afforded as a homeowner. If I pay my mortgage on time, I don't have to worry about the bank taking my property away. Why should I expect anything less for those who are renting from me and adhering to their responsibilities as a renter? As a landlord, I support expanding just cause eviction protection because it is just. I also support the act to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 families except those that are owner occupied. Senate Bill 143 should be supported because it will advance racial and gender justice in our state. Please pass this bill to continue to move our state towards equity, fairness, and respect for all residents, regardless of race, gender, class, or income levels. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Natalie Giza. Chelsea Connery.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Co-chairs Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Chelsea Connery. I'm a resident of New Haven, legal intern with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, and policy advisor for Connecticut Tenants Union, testifying in support of Senate Bill 143, but would love to see it strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily properties, except owner occupied. I have personal experience with the painful and uniquely disempowering process of being threatened with a lapse of time, no fault eviction. In 2022, I was pushed out of the 3-family home I lived in for nearly 7 years when my small landlord sold to a larger corporate landlord who was aiming to more than double my rent. I left voluntarily to avoid them filing an eviction. And I know through my work supporting on eviction defense, conditions issues, and tenant organizing that my situation is not unique. Stable, quality, affordable housing positively impacts a variety of health, educational, and economic outcomes, as well as community connection and safety. I want to live and work in a Connecticut that fights for those positive outcomes. Opponents of SB 143 have employed unfounded fear-mongering arguments. Proponents have an enormous amount of research on our side, and I'll point folks to our written testimony for that. SB 143 is not a panacea to the housing crisis, but it is an important law to help create safe, stable, affordable housing by preventing displacement and insecurity. In lieu of hurting good tenants, SB 143 will actually help prevent the revolving door of tenancies that often decreases trust and safety among neighbors, helping all tenants. Landlords retain the right to evict for cause, such as harming or endangering your neighbors. And regarding some of the other concerns expressed, bona fide intent of the landlord to move in is already a codified ground for eviction, and we are more than happy to discuss how to codify concerns regarding substantial renovations. Moreover, again, despite fear-mongering about court clogging, as Executive Director of Connecticut Fair Housing Center, Greg pointed out, and Holly recently repeated, judicial data shows that the timeline for lapse of time versus other evictions is insignificant. SB 143 does not force anyone to continue renting to a tenant. It simply requires they provide a reason for non-renewal. It's not too much to ask and costs no money for a landlord to document wrongdoing or issues before displacing someone from their home. Landlords wield tremendous discretionary power over tenants' housing future. Tenants deserve protection against that inherent power imbalance, and SB 143 helps rectify that by simply asking landlords to provide clear documentation of cause for termination. Like other business owners, landlords operate a business, have to follow regulations, and adequately calculate and prepare for risk inherent to that business. Moreover, the idea that there is contractual freedom for tenants is manifestly absurd, as is the idea that contracts are generally unregulated, but
This
that's
is up and your time has expired. Do you mind summarizing, please?
Sure. We're frequently forced into month-to-month or at best annual leases. I would be hard-pressed to find someone who would agree to a 5-year lease. For those of us tuned in to the current reality of renting, it is not unreasonable that renters doing everything right expect renewal. We should join our neighbor states, New Jersey and New Hampshire, and 3 other states in this country to implement just cause as a no-cost effective policy solution. Thank you.
For your testimony. I see no questions. John Raccio? David Klein? Jessica Stamp? Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick tonight. Good evening. My name is Jessica Stamp. I am a high school science teacher and the steward of the Blake Street Tenants Union. I'm here to testify in support of Bill SB 143 with the expansion. On August 18th, my landlord gave me and 15 of my neighbors notices to quit for time lapsed, but it was actually retaliation. We had to be out by September 1st or face no fault evictions. I'd been in my apartment for 6 years. I always pay my rent on time. I'm a good tenant and neighbor, but that didn't matter. I got the notice to quit as I was preparing to start the school year, which is always overwhelming and filled with anxiety. But my stress skyrocketed with the looming eviction threat. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was having panic attacks. I was shaking, crying. I was nauseated. I couldn't sleep. I'd been browsing apartments for months, but I couldn't find anything in my price range. And even if I found a place, because I have a recent bankruptcy due to my ex-husband, I could be denied a lease, even though I am financially stable now. And although paying a significantly higher rent would knock me out of financial stability, so moving felt kind of hopeless. With the threat of homelessness lurking around the corner, I went to work, wondering if I would lose my job if I was evicted, trying to hide what was happening from my colleagues for fear of judgment, because eviction has a stigma attached to it. I felt despair at losing everything I'd been building for the past 6 years. Fortunately, I am part of a tenant union and we fought back. And with all the work it took to coordinate our fight, I was unable to use the last week of my summer break to prep for the school year, which is of course unpaid labor, but still necessary. And on the first day with students in the classroom, I had thoughts of the protest march planned in the evening, where over 400 people, union members, politicians, showed up to support the Blake Street 16 against our no-fault evictions. I was exhausted from starting the school year and trying to save my neighbors and my own housing at the same time. I always get my job done, but the mental gymnastics required to get through this ordeal are wearing on me still. My life has been disrupted. I still don't have a lease. We're close to having a collective bargaining agreement, but my landlord could threaten eviction at any time. I honestly never realized how close to homelessness I actually am. So I am asking all of you with any kind of empathy and compassion to vote for SB 143 to expand just cause protections. Currently, vulnerable populations are protected, but I believe that all renters are vulnerable in a housing crisis. Corporate landlords, mega landlords, and aspiring mega landlords don't see our humanity. They only see us as dollar signs. So SB 143 will take away only one of the many ways they exploit renters, but it will make a huge difference in the lives of the renters around the state who are doing everything right. Please vote to protect us renters. People should not receive no-fault evictions when they've done nothing wrong. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. I see no questions. Maria Weingarten. Hi, Maria.
Hi, how are you? So thank you for having me here. I'm here to testify on SB 146, one that has not gotten a lot of attention. I am in support of all of the provisions that have been mentioned. It's the housing voucher program. And what I would like to do is just suggest that there should be an expansion of what is being done. There are so many issues with vouchers. When you look at one of the articles that Jackie Robb Thomas put out and talked about how 50% of vouchers don't get used, that's an issue. When you have specialty vouchers for people who are disabled or veterans and they're not being used in the towns that they're allocated to, that is an issue. So I think what needs to be done is a true reassessment of the voucher program in a more holistic way. Part of that would include centralizing all wait lists, which was a bill that was proposed last year. And if I understand correctly, that did not pass last year. And that's something that we also was in favor of. I'm as a member of CT 169 Strong. So I think centralizing vouchers would be a really important thing to do. I also believe that it would be very important and when you centralize vouchers, do it through the state housing authority to prevent individual housing authorities from preventing the portability of vouchers. I think if anybody really starts to take a close look and understand how the voucher system works, you recognize that the majority of all vouchers, 10,000 go to Hartford, 7,500 go to New Haven, and then from there it's Bridgeport, Waterbury, and then it's just very little. Most smaller towns get maybe 10, 15 vouchers total, and that's even if they have projects. And we're talking here about people vouchers, but on project basis, you have projects being done in smaller towns, and those vouchers are not provided, which would allow these towns to provide housing to lower income individuals who may not be able to come in at the 80% at the higher levels. So I hope you will consider these things, because I think it's a very important thing that needs to get addressed. And in a holistic way, I think it would be great if you had a task force to do this. And I would also say it's important to allocate vouchers more equitably throughout the state. I think it's a good opportunity to have other towns that are smaller who want to be part of this and who want to make a difference. And they're just not given the opportunity to have the vouchers that are given to these larger towns, larger cities. And then I know that some of these larger cities also use them as part of the financing for their developments. So I think, we are at an unlevel playing field here when you compare cities to towns. And I think we need to stop with the finger pointing, and we need to find a better way forward to create more housing everywhere. Thank you.
Maria?
Yes?
Yeah, I think I might have a bill for that.
You do?
In Senate Bill 6, something that we're working on by zip code. So we'll be having a public hearing on it. I hope you'll tune in, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Next is Jim Paris.
Good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, distinguished members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for your marathon this evening and taking the time to listen to everybody. It doesn't go unnoticed for sure. My name is Jim Paris, and I'm the CEO of the Home Builders and Modelers Association of Connecticut, and we represent roughly 800 businesses engaged in residential construction industry statewide. I want to preface my remarks by stating that I'm sympathetic to all the people behind the stories today who were failed by the system and victims of derelict and/or vindictive landlords. I'm here today to convey my association's opposition to Senate Bill 143, which seeks to limit no-cause evictions. While it is essential to address the needs of tenants and to ensure fair housing practices, I believe that imposing restrictions on no-cause evictions may have unintended consequences that could exacerbate our state's housing crisis. Housing demand in Connecticut is high, while housing production remains stubbornly low. By fostering a pro-housing development environment, we can encourage investors and developers to invest in building more housing units, thereby increasing the overall housing supply. An increased housing supply not only addresses the current shortage, but also promotes healthy competition in the market, potentially driving down rental costs. Limiting no-cause evictions might seem like a measure to protect tenants, but it could inadvertently discourage property owners from investing in rental properties. Investors may be hesitant to commit to long-term leases if they fear being unable to regain possession of their properties for legitimate reasons, such as renovations or the removal of problematic tenants. This could result in decreased willingness to invest in housing development, exacerbating the existing shortage. Furthermore, a pro-housing development approach aligns with economic growth. Construction and real estate development contribute significantly to job creation and economic stimulation. By maintaining an environment that encourages housing development, we not only address the housing shortage, but we also create employment opportunities for our residents, boosting our local economy. It's crucial to strike a balance between protecting tenant rights and fostering the environment conducive to housing development. Instead of restricting no-cause evictions, I would recommend focusing on implementing comprehensive measures that address the root cause of housing instability. And this may include initiatives such as affordable housing incentives, tenant education programs, zoning reform, preservation of existing affordable housing, supportive services for at-risk tenants, and streamlined permitting process, just to name a few. I know, Senator Moore, that a number of these type of concepts might be found in Senate Bill 11, and certainly we're looking forward to reviewing that bill and providing comments. In conclusion, limiting no-cause evictions may seem like a well-intentioned move to protect tenants, but we must consider the broader implications on our community's economic well-being. Let us work together to find balanced solutions to promote housing development, address the housing shortage, and ensure a thriving and prosperous future for all residents of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you.
Good seeing you as well.
No questions for you. Carrie Rowley.
I'm here.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, how are you?
Well,
That's good. You have done,
really
I
chip
don't see,
at 10 a.m., 10 p.m.
I was gonna say you have done an absolute marathon job of this. Like it's been amazing, really and honestly. It may sound silly to watch you and the energy and the ability you have shown to just be engaged all day, because this has been a very long day. I've been on myself since the beginning. So it's thank you for your attention and everybody for your ongoing look at this. But I'm sorry, I wanted to kind of, and I don't know why my camera's not working, but here we go. Hold on, that might be me, not you. Okay, there we go. And good evening. Senator Moore, Representative Cons, ranking members, Tony Scott, Rep Simpson, and esteemed members of the Housing Committee. My name is Carrie. Carrie Rowley. I worked providing housing for Connecticut residents for 15 years, actually. Property managers, management companies, and landlords are in the business of housing people. Our communities and businesses work when people are occupying homes. I've always said my office may be where I work, but it's where my residents live. Our issues in Connecticut are actually in supply and housing. The last gentleman who spoke put that very, very well. So I don't even feel like I need to go into it, but oh my gosh, if I could second everything he said, I would. We need more housing. SB 143 and HB 5156 don't do anything to create a greater supply of housing, and I oppose both of them per my testimony that I've already submitted online. SB 143 removes lapse of time from the existing statute. A lease is a contract at the end, and both parties have the option to move forward or end it. And I wanted to give an example of where I've had to see it in my experience or come close to it, having to use it. I had a resident who became very disruptive and abusive in a building. He always paid his rent on time. But it's, as somebody said earlier, actually somebody from the apartment association like myself, like it's hard to show like somebody leaving lit cigarettes in hallways and smoke and banging and like bouncing on their floors in the middle of the night. It's hard to show that, and other residents, the burden of proof is on us to show that this person is being disruptive, and other tenants become uncomfortable because they're afraid that person is going to retaliate against them. I've seen it time and time again. I had multiple conversations with him, with his neighbors, and nothing, he just kept doing it. He just persisted. So finally, we decided to non-renew him at the end of his lease. He did move before we had to serve him a notice to quit, but I didn't actually fully have to even use it, but it was to have that option. I was going to lose a lot of other very good residents who were not being disruptive like this and who were not interrupting everybody's life on a daily and nightly basis like this gentleman was. Also, Connecticut has a significant number of aged rental properties and has been falling short in the amount of housing that needs to be built to accommodate the housing needs of residents and businesses of the state. New owners are buying older communities and buildings to update and restore them to better condition. Taking away a property owner's right to utilize the lapse of time becomes prohibitive in the rehabilitation of older properties. Legislation such as this further exacerbates the issue of declining an older stock of homes in Connecticut because people and businesses. Oh, sure, will not want to invest in housing development. My last point was on HB 5156, and just that I recently had I also oppose it. It's the 60-day notice, and I oppose it because I recently had a reassessment of my house in which it went up 160% in the assessed value, which means, and I won't even find out what my taxes are for until the town or the city decides on the budget. But if it stayed where it was, my taxes could go up $300 a month. If you look at that in a 250 unit apartment community, that is just shy of $1 million a year in increased cost, which you don't know about until the town decides on that, and then it takes place effectively. So it's important to us to have these protections in place. Thank you all for your time, and I welcome any questions. I would love to help in resolving anything going forward.
Thank you, Carrie. I see no questions. Sean Gio?
Hi, Senator Moore. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, Representative Scott. First, I want to say I unfortunately did not get to stay the entire night in person. I was in person for most of the day, and I just want to thank particularly the three of you. I know you've been there the almost the entirety of the day. So I appreciate you having all that you've heard the testimony today from so many different people. I'm here to speak on SB 143, as were most of folks today. But first, I just want to go back to correct some information that we heard from a previous speaker regarding vouchers. It was stated that 50% of vouchers don't get used. That is not correct. The reporting that was referenced says that a number of people using federal vouchers are unable to find homes, and as a result lose the access to their voucher. That does not mean the vouchers don't get used. They don't get used by that family, which is a tragedy. The other thing I'd like to remind you, which of course you know, is there are federal vouchers and there are state vouchers, and the federal vouchers are allocated by the HUD, federal government, not by the state. But we're in luck because the state does have a great rental assistance program, a RAP program, that it is in control of how it's used, and it is centrally administered now. Regarding 143, before my time's up, you heard a lot from a lot of people, really amazing testimony about what it's like to be a tenant, a renter in Connecticut, and it's really difficult in this environment, as Jim Paris had said earlier, where we have very little home growth, very little housing creation, which means many of our lowest income families are living in homes that are the oldest. We have some of the oldest housing in the country, and often in the poorest condition, and creating vulnerable environments for them. And until we can get to a place of housing abundance, which is going to require all those things Jim mentioned, including zoning reform, but until we get to then, it is completely appropriate for the state to enact things just like just cause eviction protections. So I won't take any more of your time. I'll stop now. And again, thank you for your attention to this all day long.
Thank you, Sean, for your testimony. I use a lot of the information that you provide in understanding the bigger picture in layman's term. So thank you for that also. Next is Amy Casadena Hall. Sharon Redfern. Hi, Sharon. Thank you for being part of the crew.
Good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, Ranking Member Scott and Sampson, and distinguished members of the Housing Committee. My name is Sharon Redfern. I'm the Executive Director of the Cornerstone in Vernon, Connecticut, and a resident of Allington. And I'm here to speak in favor of SB number 145, an act appropriating funds for the homeless response system. Cornerstone is a faith-based nonprofit that has been in Vernon since 1983. We operate 3 homeless shelters, a community kitchen, food cupboard, clothing and diaper banks, and offer a senior food outreach program. We encourage all of the residents in our area to use our programs so that they can pay their rent and avoid being in one of our shelters. We are one of 2 programs operating a homeless shelter in Greater Hartford that is not located in Hartford, and we are the only one in Tolland County. Currently, we are providing winter warming services in our shelters for about 45 people nightly across our 3 locations, 2 serving families and 1 for individual adults. And we also offer the only family triage, which is emergency placement in both counties. Every night our shelters are full. We have to work with other shelters to try to get people who come to us that we can't take in. And just as happens in other shelters, sometimes the only shelter option we have is to offer people a chair to sleep in for the night. We are a town with an approximate population of 29,000 people. As such, we are not eligible for funding through the Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG, or the CDBG Community Block Development Grant that shelters in the larger municipalities can access. Those require towns to have a population of 50,000 or more. So this is a disincentive for smaller cities and towns to offer costly shelter services and reduce the burden on our bigger cities. But small or large, those of us that are operating shelters currently are struggling to stay afloat, even as we need more shelter capacity and the staff to help move people out of shelters to permanent housing. In 2023, the cost of operating our shelters was approximately $490,000, and we are a small operation compared to the Hartford shelters. Like they do, we are constantly looking for funds to operate. We are continuously writing grants, doing appeals to donors, holding fundraising events to fund our operations. We are fortunate that we work with Journey Home, and they do we are a subcontractor for the months of December through March for winter warming, but the other 8 months are always a struggle. Without a consistent source of guaranteed funding, all shelters find themselves competing for ever smaller pots of grant, foundation, and individual donor funds to operate. In our shelter, as in all our programs, the number of people needing services continues to rise. Not only are we serving more people with less funding, but their needs have become more complex and requiring greater levels of case management and care coordination. A lot of these people that we've heard the landlords talking about today that they would evict because they're problematic, they end up in my shelter. So we are only able to pay our shelter staff minimum wage with no benefits while asking them to deal with mental health issues, drugs and alcohol addiction, medical problems, and just plain stressed out people living at their lowest point. If it wasn't for the fact that our staff are caring and empathetic people who want to help others, we would lose them all to other jobs. I tell people all the time, we pay fast food workers higher wages with incentives than we do the people who are caring for some of the most vulnerable people among us. So I'm asking you to pass this appropriations bill to equalize funding for shelters. Housing is the solution to homelessness, but until the housing is there, the shelters are the last place for the vulnerable people to come. Please provide the needed funds in order for organizations like Cornerstone to help the homeless get shelter, to find housing, and live productive lives in Connecticut, one of the wealthiest states in the U.S. Thank you.
Thank you for staying to the end. Are you familiar with the fund that comes from the money from real estate investment that's called Ira Vita?
Yes, we actually got $15,000 from them this year.
That's us.
It was great. We appreciated that. That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you. I kind of remembered the name going
Okay.
through the process, so thank you. Representative Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to say thank you to Sharon for not only sticking it out all night and being part of this democratic process, but also for the great work that you do and that Cornerstone does for the Vernon Rockville community. And more importantly, I want to ask this question. I already kind of know the answer to this, but I want you to be able to speak to it because it's often forgotten that in our region of the state, there is poverty. It's not thought of, at a town that's just about 30,000 people like Vernon, that we have that amount of need. So my question is, who are we serving at Cornerstone and where are they coming from? It's not just Vernon, is it?
No, we actually serve people from all of Tallinn County, quite a few people from Hartford County. The most recent ALICE report, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed report through the United Way, which is basically working poor. In Vernon, we had, I believe it was 34% of our population fit that guideline. So we are seeing people who used to be donors who are coming to us. most of our staff is eligible for our services. Our numbers at our food cupboard have gone up by 47% since last year. So we're seeing a lot of seniors. We're seeing a lot of folks who are working minimum wage jobs. And as I said, we encourage them to come to us because we know they need to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, get the food from us, stay in your housing. So we serve everybody.
And thank you for doing that. So thank you again for being here today. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And please keep it up, and hopefully we can do something on this end to help. Thank you.
Thank you, and be safe in your travel.
Thank you.
Lin Yang. John Souza.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for staying. I know it's been a long day for everybody. My name is John Souza. I am a full-time landlord, and I volunteer as president of the Connecticut Coalition of Property Owners. The coalition is a group of people around the states from different small landlord groups. Most of our members are local to the towns they serve. We have mostly small and mid-sized landlords in our organization, and we've been a constructive voice for responsible landlords for many years. First, I'd like to say quickly that we do support some of the bills on the agenda tonight, including 142, 145, 146, 147, and 5154. All these would provide more funds for needed services to help tenants around the state. I didn't want to just come to complain about 143, which I'm going to do. I know you've heard lots of things tonight about how, landlords need to have this reason to get rid of people when it's necessary. I have to tell you, from 35 years of experience, it's the truth. I know a lot of people said, well, they use it vindictively, and I'm sorry to hear that, and that's a bad thing if it's true. We do have laws already protecting those people. Maybe we need to expand some of those laws. I don't think that, it's something that they should have to fear, but there are laws already. They should expand them and make them aware of it. Secondly, retaliatory evictions, there should be ways of limiting those also. Same type of thing, increase the laws, strengthen the laws to stop them. Sorry, my biggest concern with the whole evictions things, I have some testimony here. It's really a graceful way to end a relationship between landlord and tenant. I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but once you do a lapse of time, the tenant can have up to 6 months additional after the proceedings, after the judgment, to find another place to move to. If I have to do a cause eviction, which I've done, and it's miserable, and I'll explain that in a second. If they lose, they can have 5 days, a week, a month at the most to get out. So it could put a lot more stress on tenants. It is very difficult, as you heard, to evict for cause. And I'll give you a great example. The drug dealer who's dealing drugs out of the apartment, it's usually a boyfriend of the person living there. Nobody's going to testify against that person unless I get the police to kick in the door and arrest the person and have a police report. I'll never get rid of them because their person's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. Or the smoker who smokes pot in a non-smoking business building, and the guy upstairs is a truck driver and he gets tested for drugs because it's federal law, and he's complaining. So what do? I ask the guy downstairs to move. It's that simple. We need to have the ability to get rid of them. If I want to remodel my buildings, and most of my buildings in Hartford are over 100
Your 3
years
minutes
old.
are up. Do you mind summarizing, please?
Thank you. The unintended consequences of this bill will be you're going to damn good tenants to live with a bunch of jerks. I mean, I condensed it down as much as I can. If I don't have the ability to control what goes on in the building, then you're going to make good people have to live with bad people. That's just the way it is. And there are tenants that can be difficult, and we need to be able to control it. If there's problems within the building, the city should have more power to inspect, to solve the problems. Hartford has a great program. They started about a year ago. They inspect every single apartment. Nobody has to call even. They'll come. They started with large buildings. They've been working their way down. I've had them through my buildings. They inspect every single unit. So it's easy to solve if they want to. We do need more housing. That's the bottom line. And the way to do it is to encourage people to want to invest in property, to want to build more. And this law will not help that in the long run. Thank you. I'll take questions. 3 minutes goes pretty fast.
Thank you. Are there any questions? There are no questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, James Ramsey. I believe you're online.
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening.
Good evening, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is James Ramsey, and I'm a staff attorney and the Director of Community and Legal Partnerships at Open Communities Alliance. I'm testifying today in support of SB 143 with a proposed amendment to also cover tenants in buildings that have fewer than 5 units and are not owner-occupied. Briefly, I'd also like to testify in support of SB 146, 2 aspects in particular. Sections 1F and 2C, which are designed to ensure market responsive values of DOH vouchers, and Section 1I, which authorizes the use of electronic signatures within DOH's housing voucher programs. OCA has additional thoughts about other aspects of the bill that we will submit in written testimony. As it relates to SB 143, there aren't a lot of things that I can say that you haven't already heard, but I'll briefly offer a couple of points that are more fleshed out in my own written testimony. First, as a conceptual note, there's been a lot of talk about landlords' property rights. Well, legally speaking, tenants also have property rights. For example, the rights of possession and enjoyment of the property. Landlord-tenant law is meant to provide a balance between the property rights of landlords and the property rights of tenants. And SB 143 provides greater balances to these different sets of already existing property rights. Second, I want to emphasize, as others have, that there are very little data that conclusively prove the effect of strong renter protections on housing supply or pricing. We just don't have it at this point. But we do have examples of strong renter protections that have not deterred development in the US or abroad, as in Seattle, New Jersey, Switzerland, and Tokyo. Third, on the point of self-renewing leases, landlords and tenants are free to renegotiate the terms of the lease at the end of the lease term. While a lease is a contract, it is not like any other contract. There are special rights and responsibilities that attend to property ownership and residency in the United States, Connecticut in particular. And as in other issues, the government has already deemed it inappropriate to completely subordinate housing to the whims of the market and private actors. There are subsidies, rules, and regulations for housing, and these are important. The better framing of this issue, then, is not whether landlords will be forced to do something with their property that they don't want to do, but instead, given the unique power of housing to shape the lives of residents, determining the conditions under which an agreement between a landlord and a tenant might be altered or terminated. The legislative history of the existing just cause protection statute shows that the legislature recognized the importance of giving special protections and clarity to vulnerable renters when they enacted it. SB 143 simply takes their logic seriously and carries it forward into today's housing crisis. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I do not believe we have any questions. Thank you. Okay, Dave Richardson. Thomas Burr.
Yes, good evening, Senator Moore and Representative Khan and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Thomas Burr. I'm the Public Policy Manager of the Connecticut chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI Connecticut. I am testifying today regarding SB 145, an act appropriating funds for the homeless response system. I should tell you that NAMI is dedicated to building better lives for those with lived experience with mental health conditions and their families. NAMI Connecticut and its 9 local affiliates provide support groups and education programs for people with mental health conditions and their loved ones, and advocates for policies to improve the lives of people affected by mental health conditions. Now, regarding SB 145, the bill's stated purpose is to appropriate funds for certain homelessness and housing programs and require the commissioners of housing and mental health and addiction services to submit a report on the expenditure of such funds. As the country's largest grassroots mental health organization, we know that people with mental health conditions are overrepresented in the homeless population. Personally, as a NAMI family support group facilitator for over 10 years, I hear over and over again from caregivers who are overwhelmed trying to care for loved ones living at home with a mental health condition, but have nowhere to turn, as supportive housing is in very short supply. And the only way a person can currently qualify for supportive housing is to be literally homeless. I myself was faced with this awful choice when my adult son was not doing well, dealing with his bipolar disorder, and we could no longer care for him at home, as we had two other children, his two sisters who were 3 and 5 years old at the time, and it was just not a good situation for them to be witnessing my son struggle with his illness. Without this funding, we cannot meet the critical needs of some of the Connecticut's citizenry's most vulnerable individuals and families. Therefore, we are requesting a total of $20 million from the legislature, which includes the items that I listed in my written testimony. Because it's late, I'm not going to go through it all. I tell you that Sarah Fox from CCH already covered it in great detail. Refer to her testimony as well. And certainly Sharon Redfern just a few minutes ago really painted a picture of what the need is from her perspective running one of these homeless shelters in Vernon. So with that, I just want to add, Senator Moore, we heard your comments earlier about the $20 million investment in housing that is planned to be included in SB 6. I'm very looking forward to seeing that, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you all for staying so late tonight. I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any questions for you. Megan Sharer.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. First off, I want to say thank you for staying so late. It's greatly appreciated to give everyone their voice and chance to speak, so that is greatly appreciated. My name is Megan Scherer. I am a resident of West Hartford and the Policy Advocacy Manager for the Hispanic Health Council. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning eviction for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner-occupied. The Hispanic Health Council is the largest service provider for the Latino community in the state of Connecticut. Our mission is to promote equity and address health disparities for Hispanics, Latinos, and other vulnerable communities through research, advocacy, and culturally resonant services. Our goal is to ensure that the community can reach their highest level of health. Housing security plays a huge role in health equity. Almost daily, I hear from the community I work with that their biggest worry is housing. The conditions they are living in are unsafe. Community members are facing issues like mold, broken heat and air conditioning, broken plumbing, and cockroach infestations. Living in these types of conditions will have a long-term impact on their health and well-being. When I ask them if they have spoken to their landlord about improving the state of their apartment, they tell me they do not want to say anything because they are fearful that the landlord will evict them for complaining. This is a valid reason because none of the community I work with are protected by just cause evictions. This means at the end of the lease period, the landlord could evict them for complaining, but simply claim they're ending the lease for different reasons, and the tenant has no power to say otherwise. This leads to the community members continuing to live in a house that will harm their well-being because it is their only option. At the Hispanic Health Council, our providers are fighting every day to ensure vulnerable communities can reach their highest level of health. But it is impossible when policies are not put into place to protect them. I know for a matter of fact that the service providers will go above and beyond to ensure the community always has a roof over their head that protects their health. But there are limits on what they can do when there are limited housing protection policies. In Connecticut, Black renters are over 3 times more likely than white renters to face eviction. And Hispanic Latino renters are over 2 times more likely to face evictions than white renters. This is unjust, and the answer is simple on how to fix it. Expand just cause evictions to everyone. My community does not deserve to suffer in unfit housing conditions because they fear they will be evicted for asking their landlords to make improvements that legally they have to do. Tenants deserve to have basic protections to ensure they will not be evicted at a moment's notice without reason. Connecticut tenants are here. They are here late. They are here and passionate about speaking about a solution to ensure renters are protected. Today, I am asking the Housing Committee in Connecticut General Assembly to pass Senate Bill 143, an act concerning eviction for cause, and strengthen it to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings except those that are owner occupied. Thank you, everyone, so much for allowing us the time to speak on behalf of the bills that are here in the public hearing and giving the space to the community. I hope you consider passing Senate Bill 143 and expanding it to 1 to 4 multifamily buildings except those that are owner occupied. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions for you. Next is John McNamara. Hi, John.
John,
You're
I
on
believe
mute.
you're muted.
Thanks, Senator Moore, Representative Khan. I'm John McNamara from New Britain, an alderman from Ward 4, and a majority leader of the Common Council. And thanks to members of the Housing Committee for this opportunity to support 2 bills on this long day of hearing from the public to strengthen protection of tenants who may face eviction without cause in SB 143, and the second one to partially meet a serious funding gap in the homeless response system in SB 145. As we've heard, Senate Bill 143 extends rights to all tenants, except those in owner-occupied dwellings, against arbitrary eviction, affording all rent payers the same protections that the current law allows for persons age 62 or those with a disability. The law that's been on the books for more than 40 years, I know it's been pointed out before, for some deserving citizens should apply to all tenants who pay their rent and abide by the rules. The need to strengthen the eviction law becomes clearer every day in the post-pandemic rental housing market. The availability of affordable housing has declined, and this strengthening of the law is about the bad actors and speculators in New Britain, in Hartford, other cities, who are driving up rents to harsh levels and that are adding to the caseload of New Britain's Fair Rent Commission. Allowing absentee landlords who raise rents beyond the fair return and to meet their costs with the added loophole to evict for no reason hurts many responsible landlords. It disrupts families and is contributing to the homeless crisis, particularly in cities like New Britain, which bear most of the burden. Our service providers are delivering those services. Others have pointed out about the Center for Fair Housing estimates about evictions with cause can reduce evictions and can alleviate the housing crisis we're going through now. No cause evictions contribute also to discrimination based on race, family, and status for the bad actors I mentioned. They destabilize lives of responsible tenants in neighborhoods. And they also, I would say, preserve the rights of landlords to proceed with evictions for specific and legitimate reasons. I've heard property managers under the threat of violence today and facing bad acting tenants. I'm wondering if you could look at the causes to make sure those areas are covered in this law. I also want to support SB 145, the demand for shelter and support services for the unhoused has dramatically increased in New Britain.
Your 3 minutes are up and your time has expired. Do you mind summarizing, please?
Sure, thanks. The $20 million of additional dollars applied, some of which to New Britain, can be of a measurable help to the good service providers we have in the city now dealing with the crisis. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara. Mr. McNamara, I just have a question. Do you have a Fair Rent Commission?
We do. The last year, Citizen Action brought it back to life. It's been on the books since 2012. But because of the post-pandemic rise in rents from absentee landlords, many of the landlords I know in New Britain, the last thing they want to do is raise the rent. But under reassessment and higher costs, sometimes they have to. But we've had it on the books for 2012, and the caseload is increasing.
So we're going to have a informational forum on February 27th. So maybe you'll check our website to learn more about it and participate.
I'll try and be there. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Next is Amy Epler Epstein. Amy, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, and I don't know if you can see me or not. I somehow lost the thing where you can
Can't see
picture,
you,
but
but hear you,
oops.
which is the most important thing, that we can hear you. Are you on mute now?
Can you hear me now? I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
we can.
Okay, sorry. My name is Amy Epler Epstein. I'm an attorney at New Haven Legal Assistance, where I've been practicing for over 35 years, representing tenants in the greater New Haven area and helping them with their housing problems. I have submitted written testimony, and so I just want to highlight a few points in response to what I've been hearing. I've been listening to the hearing off and on all day since 11 o'clock this morning, and I have heard probably at least a dozen landlords say that they need lapse of time eviction for various situations they faced where they've had to evict tenants because of cat urine odor, fighting, visitors coming day and night, disturbing their neighbors, selling drugs. These are all things that landlords can do under existing law. These are evictions they can bring, and passing Senate Bill 143 would in no way stop them from being able to evict these tenants. The current law allows them to evict for cause. Those are all good cause evictions that they'd be able to bring. And I'm sorry, in the beginning, if I didn't already say, I'm here to support Senate Bill 143 and asked for it to be amended to strengthen it so that it covers buildings which have 1 to 4 dwelling units unless they're owner occupied. Secondly, I know that tenants, many you've been hearing over and over all day, that so many tenants have faced lapse of time eviction in retaliation after they've made complaints about conditions, after they've complained to fair rent commissions. And the landlords have been saying, well, those are illegal. The landlord shouldn't be able to retaliate, strengthen the laws. What I need to tell you is that the process of facing an eviction is immensely stressful for tenants. This is what I do all day, every day, representing tenants, and having to go to court and say, this eviction is retaliatory. The landlord shouldn't be able to evict me. They're just getting back at me. It's terrifying for people. If they try to go to trial and prove that defense and they lose, they can be out on the street. And so people are so scared and anxious about being homeless that they often are pressured into settling, even though they have a good retaliation defense, because the prospect of not convincing the judge or losing somehow is so terrifying to them that they're forced out, and they make some compromise or they enter into some agreement just because they don't want to take the risk of a trial. So to say that lapse of time eviction, that it's okay, that there are already defenses that tenants have to retaliation by landlords, is simply on the ground. It's not true. We need these protections. We need to say that tenants can't be evicted unless there's good cause, because that reality of retaliation is real. And as long as there's no cause eviction in Connecticut, that's going to still continue to be a reality. Thirdly, I heard people talk about, why do we need coverage for units of 1 to 4? Those are owner occupied, small businesses, small landlords. That is not the case. In New Haven, where I practice, most of the housing stock is small buildings, often 1 to 3 family houses. Many of those are owned by big corporate landlords, and each of those buildings.
Your time has expired. Do you mind
Yes,
summarizing, please?
I will summarize. Each of those buildings are owned by LLCs as a separate LLC to protect them against those protections for 1 to 5. So that's why it's critical that this bill be expanded to include 1 to 4 unit buildings as well. Please review my testimony too. What you'll see is how landlords are using lapse of time evictions to raise the rent and circumvent the Fair Rent Commission processes in order to empty out buildings and gentrify them, and be able to not have to worry about raising rents against tenants because they can use lapse of time evictions when the lease is up. I urge you to support Senate Bill 143.
Thank you. Next is Rebecca Corbett.
Hello.
Hi, Rebecca.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes, and we can see you.
Okay. Hi, my name, first of all, I've been on for quite a few hours. Thank you, everybody, from the Housing Committee for hanging in there. My name is Rebecca Corbett. I'm a resident of New Haven and a retired member of Unite Here Local 34. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 through 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. I know the struggles that people can face when it comes to securing affordable housing. As a single mother, many years ago on welfare, I found myself homeless due to a retaliatory situation. And I was living in a motel room with my 2 boys. Years later, I got a good union job through a local hiring initiative and eventually was able to fulfill a lifelong dream and bought a house of my own around the corner from one of my sons in New Haven. I feel very fortunate to have found a job with good pay and benefits that allowed me to buy a house. I see the struggles of my grown children and their friends are going through the same thing to start their lives. One of my daughters recently had to move back in, bringing her 3 small children under the age of 5. She's a hard worker and she should not have to depend on me. I'm fortunate to be able to be in a position to help her, but too many are in the same situation. I serve on the Affordable Housing Commission in New Haven. We've worked to establish a land bank, testifying for more ARPA money going into affordable housing and evaluating other affordable housing policies like inclusive zoning. My work as a commissioner has opened my eyes to the many problems and challenges faced in the affordable housing crisis. There's no magic bullet, but this measure is a step in the right direction. If someone's a good tenant and they're paying their rent every month, trying to secure their future, they should not be forced out, especially in this current housing climate where the eviction could mean homelessness or having to leave a community. Our state has a shared housing crisis we have to solve, and this is one solution that will help. And I can speak personally that being evicted is terrifying. And this was 30 years ago that this happened, and it's not getting any better. You know, there has to be a solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Barbara Rogers. Kathy Flaherty. Hi, Kathy. I know you're there.
I know I'm here too, but you can at least hear me. I don't know why my picture is not loading. I apologize for that, but Senator Moore.
We can hear you.
Okay, Representative Khan and members of the Housing Committee, I want to thank you as joining with everyone for this long day of hearing. The experiences of people in the state, especially tenants who have really struggled, and I join them here in support of Senate Bill 143. An act concerning evictions for cause. Connecticut Legal Rights Project is a statewide nonprofit, and we provide legal representation to people who get mental health services from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And representing tenants in housing cases has always been a significant part of our practice. The people we represent, because they're people with disabilities, they are tenants who currently, if they live in larger buildings, have protection and can only be evicted for cause. But we have represented tenants who live in smaller buildings, which is why we join the people asking for these just cause protections to be extended to tenants who live in smaller buildings as long as they're not owner occupied. I too have listened to testimony on and off during the day, and it does really seem where you have a lot of landlords saying, well, we can't get rid of these tenants. They absolutely can, and this law will not prevent them from getting rid of those problem tenants. That's what an eviction for cause is all about. Have a reason, not simply that the lease has expired. We do know that sometimes these lapse of time evictions are brought in retaliation for a tenant having made a complaint about conditions or trying to join a tenant union or other organizing to protect their own rights. And people should not have their stable housing limited or taken away from them because they've chosen to organize with other people. This isn't obviously the solution to all of the affordable housing problems in the state, but what it really does represent is upstream prevention and helping people who already have housing remain in the housing that they have. Adopting just cause eviction protections and expanding the bill to include tenants in those smaller non-owner occupied buildings is a low cost effective policy solution, and we urge you to advance Senate Bill 143. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Kathy. I know you're used to staying up much later, so you got in early.
I did. Thank you.
Claudette Kidd. Hi, Claudette.
Good evening, Senator Moore and distinguished members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name's Claudette Kidd. I'm a housing commissioner, housing advocate, a representative of Christian Community Action's Mothers and Others for Justice, Room for All, CT Tenants Union, and a podcast about to start called Housing News Haven. I am in support of SB 143 and for it to extend to people with disabilities in 1 to 4 units in houses and buildings, except for those that are owner occupied. I was homeless in the past, evicted for not agreeing to unjustly pay more rent than others, and was considered not equally treated. And so I left. I was homeless on the street till someone took me in. Then I was eventually in a shelter. I am disabled, currently housing and food insecure, but I have support from my daughter and my friends. I'm a housing commissioner in fear of reporting housing repairs that is over a year overdue to LCI in case I am asked to move. I cannot afford to move right now. I have lived with rodents, which I have complained about for so long. I have pictures, emails sent, spent my own money to try and control the issue with no success. So in the end, I ended up getting a cat. Problem solved. Well, one problem solved. If I miss my rent, I am charged a late fee. Yet I actively serve my community. Yet some landlords go years without doing repairs, with no reprimands until recently, where the fine has increased for them not doing repairs. I was laid off from my job due to funding cuts, soon to be employed, but still in fear of being evicted because of struggles with bills. Yet I advise people all the time what to do when their housing is insecure, yet I have my own fears. I've heard in the earlier on in this meeting about rights. I keep hearing about rights. I keep hearing about, as Americans, we have rights. How about the individual rights of all, regardless of race, immigration status, age, disability, gender, and whether you have children or not? The definition of rights is that which is morally correct or honorable. As a landlord, if you decide to rent, then some of your rights are taken away, as you are now a business owner making a profit. Therefore, you now have legal regulations that you have to follow as a landlord and a business owner. As a tenant, you need rights to protect you, keep you safe, secure, and at an affordable amount of rent. If you're in compliance with your lease and out of the greed of the landlord,
your time has expired. Do you mind summarizing?
Sure, that was quick. Extortionate rates forcing tenants out, who some have lived in property for decades, now potentially become homeless. Imagine how this affects generations. Think of children and how it affects schooling, mental health, overall health, food insecurities, and the list go on. This month is Black History Month. Most of the people at risk of housing insecurity are Black or Hispanics. Slavery was not a right. Those rights were taken away from people when they were stolen from families and sold into slavery. America was built off the backs of slaves, and many people profited and still profit today. Today, I learned that the Supreme Court wants to criminalize homelessness, imprisoning them. This is a cruel and unusual punishment and will cause more trauma and violate their human rights. There are many excellent landlords, and thank you for all that you do. Then there are work to do with other landlords to keep things equitable. Let me see. I urge you to approve Just Cause SB 143. It is a move in the right direction. Please keep up the good work that you do for those in need of housing and protection. And thank you for allowing me to participate and to be heard. That's
Thank
it.
you for your testimony.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. And thank you for what you do.
Next is Mark Washington. Hi, Mark.
Good evening, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Mark Washington. I'm a lifelong resident of New Haven and the chapter vice president of the Blake Street Tenant Union. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning eviction for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 in 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. To me, housing insecurity and homelessness are not just statistics. They are my lived experience. I was homeless for 2 years. About a year ago, I finally got my own apartment, but for the first 5 months of living there, I still didn't unpack anything. I just kept living out of bags. Not having a safe place that you can call your own at the end of the day is one of the most stressful things that you can go through as a person. Healing from that kind of stress is a long journey. Being homeless not only displaces you physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Homelessness affects not just individuals, but generations. It's a trauma that impacts entire families for years. Those who have never felt the anxiety of having nowhere to go may not understand, but I hope they will learn from those of us who have. Many people are currently becoming homeless because their incomes are not high enough for the cost of rent. There's no safety net. All we have are shelters that are already too full. I would know because I work at a shelter at nights. But that's only one of my jobs. I have 3 to make sure I can pay my rent. The fact that people are getting evicted because they can't afford the rent is a severe injustice that we are not doing enough to address. And yet today, we're not even talking about that type of eviction. We're talking about evictions for no reason at all. We're talking about evictions because the landlords want to clear out the entire building of tenants and replace them with the higher paying people. We're talking about Black and Hispanic communities being forced out of their home for no reason because the landlord doesn't see community, homes, or people. All they see is investment strategies. We're talking about the kind of no-fault evictions that my current landlord tried to use to break up my tenant union last year. The truth is, to me, just cause eviction protection is the bare minimum of what needs to be done in Connecticut. When the stakes are homelessness, trauma, and generational harm, asking that evictions at least come with a reason behind them is not too much to ask. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Johnny Gunblatt. Johnny Gunblatt. Richard Cooper. Hi, Richard.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the chance to speak tonight. My name is Richard Cooper. I live in Plantsville, Connecticut. That is a part of Southington. And I am speaking in support of raised Senate Bills 142, 143, and 145. Excuse me. Senate Bill 142 could immediately improve the living conditions and quality of life for those in Southington's 967 Housing Authority units. Raised Senate Bill 143 represents a legislative initiative aimed at reinforcing principles of justice, transparency, and housing stability. This bill, I believe, will enhance Connecticut's housing laws by making sure evictions are transparent and based solely on substantial reasons, thus protecting the rights and dignity of Connecticut's peoples. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The General Assembly, I believe, could be doing more, but by advocating for eviction processes grounded in just cause, we can offer just a little more protection to those in precarious housing situations. Theoretically, this bill really should bolster the trust between landlords and tenants. Bill 145 aims to provide essential services to those without shelter, which will hopefully offer concrete support to those in critical need. I urge this institution to support these bills to maintain the integrity of Connecticut's housing system and to affirm our state's dedication to the principles upon which our nation was founded: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let us proceed with foresight and compassion, ensuring that our housing policies mirror our shared values and aspirations for a just and inclusive Connecticut. By supporting these bills, you support human dignity and help to bridge the exponentially growing socioeconomic gap between the rich and the poor. I ask you all to live up to the potential of Connecticut and fulfill your end of the social contract's promise. I implore you all to reject fear and embrace progress instead. Thanks for listening to my testimony, you guys. Excuse me.
Thank you, Richard. Need to get to some water.
Yes.
We heard everything you said, so thank you.
Been a long night, sorry.
Brian Lemire.
Good evening. I'm here. How are you? I'm talking a little softly now. I had some members of my household in bed sleeping and getting ready for school tomorrow. So I hope you can hear me okay.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Brian Lemire. I am the Director of Operations for Paradigm Communities and a board member of the Connecticut Apartment Association. I'm here to voice my opposition to Senate Bill 143. I've been serving the residents of Connecticut to provide quality housing for the past 20 years. We currently have around 4,000 people living in our communities and have housed tens of thousands over the past 20 years in the housing provider business. We take great pride in providing safe, reliable, and quality housing for generations of residents. We house small and large families, working professionals, students, retirees from all ethnicities and backgrounds and incomes. We manage a large number of apartments and in the past 20 years have only utilized lapse of time as the reason for evicting anyone a fraction of the time. In fact, in Connecticut, only about 12% of evictions are for this reason. But to pass this bill as proposed will basically nullify the end dates of private lease contracts. More importantly, it nearly eliminates our ability to evict anyone for bad actions such as lease violations, nuisance, causing damage, or even violating the law, sometimes with domestic or other violence. This would also translate into conveying perpetual tenancy rights, which in fact is taking of a property. Once again, the majority of the landlords and their managers in Connecticut do not want to evict residents. It's a lose-lose situation for us. You know, just thinking about this, I kind of worry about my children. They're teenagers and will be renters soon. I also worry about my parents who are retired and considering selling their home and entering the rental market. Why do I worry? Because tying the hands of landlords and not allowing them to use lapse of time evictions to remove tenants who are causing havoc amongst their neighbors and impacting the lives of residents who are good neighbors and citizens. Lapse of time evictions are a last resort, but are necessary and infrequent times when the need is warranted. Furthermore, a major potential negative outcome for this ill-conceived bill is that it de-incentivizes property owners to take any risks of renting to individuals who don't have any prior renting experience or pose any risks. How does that help with solving homelessness? I strongly urge the Housing Committee to focus on resolving the shortage of housing in Connecticut. This is caused by a lack of supply and not the actions of few bad landlords. However, instead of focusing on solution to this shortage, these proposed bills will severely.
Time has expired. Do you mind summarizing?
Absolutely. Landlords aren't responsible for the inflationary cost. I'm sorry, but if you want to help people find more and better housing, the focus in this legislature must be bills that help our industry create more new and revitalized housing more quickly and stop making it more and more expensive to rent, own, build, and live in Connecticut. I support the legislation that will increase the supply of real quality, affordable housing, but Senate Bill 143 will discourage this, making the current housing crisis worse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Shuli Lieber.
Evening, and thank you very much for all the time you spent today. It's been a long day for us all, but I can only imagine how difficult and long it's been for you. So thank you all for.
Do we have a problem?
My fault, Senator. Give me 1 sec.
Hello.
We have you back now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but suddenly I got disconnected.
I believe that was our fault. I apologize.
Okay. No worries. Not sure where I lost you, but once again,
Start
thank
from
you
the
for.
beginning.
Okay, thank you so much, all the members of the committee and senators and congressmen for the time you spent today. It's been a long day for us all, and I can only imagine how difficult it's been for you. I am a longtime landlord, and thankfully I've been blessed with the opportunities to do acts of kindness with my properties, which involve, I do have some seniors who I've had the privilege and the pleasure of providing housing for, well below market at times because that's what they can afford. However, I do have to voice my opposition to SB 143 because I've also had, especially for example, where I bought a property and there was an existing tenant there, and I bought it actually going into COVID. And there was the moratorium on evictions during that time. And this particular tenant that I inherited was very troublesome. There were domestic issues there. There was drinking. There was probably drugs involved as well. But neighbors don't want to testify. And during COVID, there was no ability to do any evictions anyhow. It was extremely difficult on all the neighbors, and all the other people who were good, kind, well-meaning people had to suffer through a very difficult situation. And with eliminating the ability to do evictions without cause, that will lead to many of those types of situations being unresolvable. And impact the people that deserve to live in peace and tranquility. In addition, I am kind of boggled by the same thing that Senator Sampson mentioned earlier today, where if at the end of a term, whether it's a year, and I have many 2-year leases, actually, I do offer those very often. If at the end of 2 years, I was very happy with a tenant and I wanted them to stay, but they were looking to move on, I can't imagine a world where anybody would suggest it be okay to force that tenant to stay because that's what I wanted. It was in my interest for them to stay. So why is it that if it's not in the interest of the landlord at the end of the 2 years for the tenant to stay, why could the tenant force their way to be able to stay? I sympathize with the individuals that are in bad situations due to no fault of their own. And certainly if the landlords are slumlords, they should be dealt with. but the answer is not to take away the rights of people to enter into free will contracts with each other and know that the contract is a binding contract for all parties in all the matters that are involved of that contract. And I thank you for your time and consideration, and hope that you will oppose Bill number 143.
Thank you, sir. Next is Stephen Monroe. Tomzak?
Yes, good evening, Senator Moore, Representative.
Yeah, you were able to hear my nerves?
Good, good evening, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony in support of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause. I am Stephen Monroe Tomzak, a resident of Wallingford, representing the Social Welfare Action Alliance Connecticut chapter, a progressive group of professional social workers, allies, and community activists working in partnership with those communities most negatively impacted by current social inequities and injustice. I support Senate Bill 143, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. This is much needed legislation. Tenants who have paid their rent and maintained their property should not be evicted without cause. For 40 years, Connecticut has had a law providing just cause eviction protections to tenants who are 62 plus and have a disability and live in a building with 5+ units. This law has had no unintended consequences and has effectively prevented these tenants from arbitrary displacement. Furthermore, data show that evictions are not equitably distributed across all demographic groups. Black renters in Connecticut are over 3 times more likely than white renters to face eviction, and Hispanic Latinx renters are over 2 times more likely to face eviction than white renters. Expanding just cause eviction protection will effectively result in at least a 10% reduction in evictions overnight. Just cause eviction protection is a low-cost and effective policy solution. And importantly, it is a policy that would advance social and economic justice. 5 other states and 12 cities have just cause eviction protection, and studies of California cities that have had just cause eviction protection for more than a decade show that there is a statistically significant decrease in displacement. We need to reduce this kind of unjust displacement and assure people housing stability. This proposal aligns with SWA Connecticut's values of social and economic justice, and therefore I strongly urge you to pass this much needed bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Leslie Blateau?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Leslie Blateau. I'm a resident of New Haven, as well as president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers and Pre-K-12 Divisional Vice President for AFT Connecticut. I'm also a member of the Connecticut for All Coalition. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. As a representative of dedicated educators in New Haven Public Schools, I can say with certainty that our working conditions and our students' learning conditions are deeply interconnected. In addition, our students' living conditions impact their learning conditions. It is for these reasons that I'm here today to advocate for just cause eviction protection, a low-cost and effective policy solution. By passing this legislation, Connecticut can join 5 other states and 12 cities who also have just cause eviction protection. Decade-long studies of some of these cities in California show there is a statistically significant decrease in displacement as a result of this policy change. Some of our most vulnerable students in New Haven Public Schools deserve the protections that this legislation can provide. As recently as November 2023, we learned that over 550 New Haven Public School students are experiencing homelessness. Let us not forget that in the midst of continued need and skyrocketing housing costs, these numbers will continue to rise. As a result, we are looking for additional protections from the state to ensure that families are not unfairly targeted for eviction. Evictions have a detrimental impact on children's education as well as their mental and physical health. Our educators in New Haven and throughout the state see this impact firsthand when our students experiencing homelessness struggle to make it to school and have a hard time engaging in the relationship building and academic work that we design for them. Families should be able to access these protections as we know the role that access to stable housing can have when it comes to our students' well-being. Expanding just cause eviction protection will effectively result in at least a 10% reduction in evictions overnight. This means that with this legislation, students throughout the state will have a much needed second chance to remain in their homes, stay connected to their communities, and have the stability necessary to thrive in school. For those who fear negative consequences, let's review the evidence. For over 40 years, Connecticut has had a law providing just cause eviction protections to tenants who are over 62 or have a disability and live in a building with 5+ units. This law has no unintended consequences and has effectively prevented these tenants from arbitrary displacement. Let's strengthen these protections for more residents in our state. The legislative process exists to improve opportunities for Connecticut's residents, not just those who own property or have access to lobbyists, but all of our residents. At a time when so many in our state continue to struggle, I urge you to take your responsibility as legislators seriously and work with your committee and colleagues to improve living conditions and housing stability for those who most need it. Please support and pass Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brian. I don't have a last name. You're 189. Matthew Johnston, number 190. We're getting to the end. Matthew, no. Cheryl Robb.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Rabe. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Senator Moore, Rep. Khan, Rep. Scott, and Rep. Ware. I'm in favor of Senate Bill number 143 and testifying and in support of the bill eviction for cause, just cause. I'm affiliated with and an advocate for Witness to Hunger, FACE, Keep the Promise, and a seasonal worker for Salvation Army, a kettle worker. I'm from Hawaii. I've been living here for 30 years. I lived in Greater New Haven for 30 years. After living there for a long time, over 10 years, the owner decided to occupy the unit, which is a multi-family home. The owner wanted to occupy the apartment, so he had evicted me with lapse of time. My lease was never up. I had difficulty to move on and made a huge impact being forced to move out of my apartment, causing housing insecurity. I was trying to work with him, but to no avail, so I personally became distraught about the situation, finding it hard to find another unit because I now experience a record of eviction. I went to the clerk of the housing court, who wrote I wasn't evicted and it was due to owner occupancy. This shouldn't happen to no one. Just because the owner wants to occupy an apartment, you now have an eviction on record. Just because I believe I paid off his mortgage, we should expand the bill to multifamily homes and to 1-4 family homes. I know there's been an issue tonight where everyone's saying that except for owner occupancy, but I'm one of those who lived in an apartment, his apartment, for over 10 years. And then he decides he wants to live there. He's not from Connecticut. He's from the state of New York, and decided he wanted to move in and then moved out of there in 2 months timing and set up some type of LLC business. And I had no recourse, no way of removing this eviction, but pleading with the House Court of New Haven to remove this eviction so that I could get another apartment. It took me close to a year to have that eviction removed from my record. And so I'm just pleading with you to please pass Bill 143. I'm in favor of it. Thank you, Senator Moore, for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Peter Kiernan. Hi, Peter.
Senator Moore, Representative Khan, esteemed members of the Housing Committee, thank you for sticking it out this long. My name is Peter Kiernan, and I am a current resident of New Haven. And as a renter and a volunteer tenant organizer, I hope to convey how SB 143 would secure the rights of tenants in Connecticut. In the past 6 months since being trained as an organizer by the Connecticut Tenants Union, I have witnessed and heard the housing struggles faced by dozens of tenants in New Haven and Hartford. It is sobering to see so many residents of one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world living without heat, with ongoing bedbug infestations, perennial flooding in their basements, and a myriad of other inhumane housing conditions. A few weeks ago, I spoke with a mother and her toddler who have had no heat in their apartment for the duration of this winter. The mother has purchased a floor heater at her own expense despite paying her rent as part of a lease in which heat is a pledged provision. Shockingly, this woman lives just the other side of the Connecticut River, within a few miles of the state legislature. When speaking with my fellow tenants, I often ask them why we as tenants do not demand of the landlord the fair living conditions to which we are entitled by lease and law. They almost always indicate that they have no choice but to accept these egregious living conditions because of the landlord's mandate to swiftly evict without justification. The mother I spoke to, who has no heat, requested repeatedly to the landlord to ameliorate conditions and even sent a formal letter, but she believes she cannot stand up for herself any further because, in her words, the landlord is so quick to send a notice to quit. Eviction can exact a terrible cost from tenants. Because the landlord can evict at whim, tenants feel helpless to advocate for the housing conditions they deserve. According to Connecticut statutes, tenants have rights to safe and healthy housing. Given the imbalance of power and resources between landlord and tenant, our state statutes place much of the responsibility on the landlord to ensure the conditions that support tenant well-being. Yet the existing levers meant to hold the landlord accountable for their responsibilities to the tenant fail to rein in negligent landlords. I have personally witnessed landlords swallow the pay into court action with ease as tenants pay rent to the court for months on end. It can be cheaper for landlords to lose months of rent, and then evict the tenant than bring housing conditions to code. The ability to evict without just cause allows the landlord to divest themselves of responsibility for housing conditions and punish tenants who exercise their rights. And when advocating for one's rights as a tenant becomes an evictable offense, the natural result is the detrimental housing conditions in which so many Connecticut tenants are trapped. By ending the blanket mandate for landlords to evict without cause, SB 143 will help equalize the scales of power in the tenant-landlord relationship. It will allow tenants to advocate for just housing conditions, curb the abusive power of corporate landlords, while still protecting the well-meaning landlord's ability to evict for good reason. I earnestly urge the committee to support SB 143 so that the rights and responsibilities of tenants and landlords in Connecticut can be more than just de jure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you hanging in there with us. Norma Jean Nilo. Hi, Norma Jean. Hi.
So good evening, Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Norma Jean Nilo, and I am a member at large of the Connecticut Tenants Union, and I'm here to support SB 143. I'm also a homegrown Woodstocker. My parents built their home on Little Pond Road in Woodstock, which is part of Windham County, shortly after my birth. At that time, it was just a dirt road nestled between the Woodstock Fairgrounds and Miller's Farm. My uncle paved and maintained all of the roads in Woodstock during his time on the town crew, where he worked until his retirement. These are the people who bettered our area, not the likes of Up Realty LLC, a New York-run LLC doing business here in Connecticut, who are claiming their goal is to better my area. Maybe they think we're just a little too country, I don't know. I joined the Brookside Lane community just over 8 years ago as a middle-aged widow looking to spend the rest of her years on Roseland Park Road. Yes, I chose to go back to the same area where I learned how to ride a bike, drive a car. Heck, I even got my lifesaver certification swimming in Roseland Lake. I am not a transient, which is characterized as by our new landlords, Up Realty. I am a member of this community. I met many like-minded individuals in this complex. Larry and Kathy, residents for over 24 years. Sherry and Keith, there over 19 years. Penny, Sue, Caroline, Kathy, Matt, Corey, all residents with the expectation of living out our days here. In fact, I met a neighbor who became my husband. But our landlord, like many large landlords across the state, wants to evict us long-term residents so that they can do sloppy and shoddy remodels in order to advertise as luxury apartments and raise the rent by 3 times. But many of us have the benefit of being protected by just cause eviction law. Because we are protected, we are allowed to stay in our homes in the town I grew up in and have a sense of stability. We are not going to let them bully and intimidate us with attempted illegal evictions under existing laws on the Connecticut books. Because we are protected, we are allowed to speak up and assert our rights without fear of being evicted for no reason. But not everybody has the same protections as I do under the current just cause eviction laws. For example, some of my neighbors chose to move in order to reduce the stress the situation was causing in their lives, to remove the housing insecurity they were experiencing and the feeling of hopelessness with no recourse. Other members of our community were forced to move. We all stood hopelessly by as a relocation truck came to haul the belongings off of those good friends and neighbors that were not protected by the current limited just cause eviction law, even though their rent was paid and they were model tenants. I support SB 143, which will expand the current protections seniors and people with disabilities have to all renters. I support this legislation because I have watched my neighbors be pushed out of their homes by no-fault evictions, and I want everyone to be protected by the same eviction protection that I am protected by. I want to tell my story and my neighbor's story so that they can't be taken advantage of by large landlords like Up Realty. Ours is not the only community being preyed upon, and just cause eviction protections can help a lot of people avoid the negative consequences of out-of-state landlords trying to tear communities like mine apart. It is a fact that for over 40 years, Connecticut has had a law
Your 3
providing
minutes
just
are up.
cause
Do you
eviction
mind summarizing,
protections.
please?
Sure.
Thank you.
To tenants who are 62 years old or have a disability and live in a complex with 5 more units. The law has had no intended consequences and has effectively prevented these tenants from arbitrary replacement. Again, I am asking for your support of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause to strengthen to cover 1 to 4 family units, except those that are owner occupied. We will not stop fighting to get this law in the books for our future friends and neighbors who are renters can continue to enjoy housing stability and enjoy the simple country lifestyle that we have chosen. Thank you for your time, and thank you. I want to applaud you for still being in chairs after over 11 hours of testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for staying. Olivia Rinks. Caitlin Duffy. August Rios.
Good evening.
Hi,
Honorable
August.
Hello. Good evening, honorable members of the Housing Committee. Thank you all for being here and listening. My name is August Rios. I'm a Yale University undergraduate urban fellow at the City of New Haven Fair Rent Commission. Today, I'm here to unequivocally express my strong support for HB 5156, an act requiring notices of rental increases. And although this bill hasn't taken up much of the agenda today, I believe that it is incredibly exigent and important. Currently, Connecticut law lacks any requirement for landlords to provide notice to their tenants before implementing rent increases. The absence of this mandated notice period impedes a tenant's ability to plan and find alternative housing when faced with abrupt raises in rental costs that they are unable to afford. My support for HB 5156 is not merely moral, but is rather grounded in my analysis of case data of New Haven Fair Rent Commission cases, which reveals a concerning trend of tenants facing sudden rental increases without adequate notice. Through my analysis, I found that in the 2022 fiscal year, approximately 200 New Haven Fair Rent Commission cases involved instances of rent increases. Among these cases, 55% involved notice periods below 60 days, and 52% of these cases involved notice periods below 31 days. In the 2023 fiscal year, this trend has unfortunately continued. So far, 97% of cases have involved notice periods below 60 days, and 51% of cases have involved notice periods below 31 days. I want to emphasize this fact. Over half of Fair Rent Commission cases regard instances where tenants are provided less than a single month's notice to absorb a rental increase or find alternative housing. Due to the tight rental conditions facing the state of Connecticut, a month to find new housing or more money, especially for working families, is not enough. For context, Section 8 voucher holders are given 60 days to find housing upon receiving a voucher. Recognizing the complexities of the housing situation in Connecticut, housing authorities are also able to permit extensions of the 60-day period, allowing a total of either 90 or 120 days to secure suitable housing. Even with this period, vouchers are lapsing. In 2021, approximately 400 vouchers in New Haven out of approximately 500 in the area expired, even within this 90-day time frame. To be clear, this bill solely aims to provide tenants with one thing: time. Time to find new housing, time to pay their landlords, time to respond. A lack of this provision means that tenants are constantly vulnerable. In conclusion, I urge the esteemed members of the Housing Committee to support and pass HB 5156. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next is Bob DeCosmo.
Hey, good evening. Thank you. Here we are again, another marathon session.
Hi, Bob.
Hear more. I give you credit, my goodness. Couple things. First, quick comment on 5156. Many property owners operate under a month-to-month oral lease, and that's a 30-day contract that renews itself. So a 60-day provision in writing would not be consistent with that agreement. So if the bill's going to pass forward, 60 days should be 30 days. I'd like to talk about 143 and just typical about what's going on. Most of my membership works during when we're doing public hearings. So please pay attention to the written testimony that was submitted by many of the property owners here in Connecticut. Today, I heard a lot of misinformation. I heard a lot of concerns about retaliatory evictions. We already have a statute 47A-20 that prohibits a landlord from evicting a tenant for making a complaint to the city for code repairs or actually repairs, and also organizing a tenants union. So a lot of testimony about, I'm afraid because I'm going to get evicted if I step forward. That's already protected by statute. I heard a lot of talk about landlords not taking care of repairs. Another statute on the books, 47A-14, tenants have a right to pay into court. And the best way to hurt a landlord is to not pay him. So I think some more information needs to be spread out to the tenant community. If you've got a bad landlord, you've got ways to deal with them, which brings me to my biggest point. The hugest problem we have right now in Connecticut is out-of-state absentee landlords are immune from prosecution in Connecticut courts. So what we're doing is we're forcing the local mom and pops out of business. New York State absentee landlords are buying them, and you cannot get them to come into court. I'm talking to Rafi about this. I've talked to Senator Miller. I've talked to Senator Hartley. We need to have a compact between New York and Connecticut to force the absentee landlords that don't take care of business, to give everybody a better reputation, to show up in our court system, hold them accountable, because we don't want bad actors in this business. I represent a lot of mom and pop landlords, and what we're doing is we're squeezing them out of business. We're actually forcing this perpetuation of having bad actors take over properties that were owned by good actors. So if we really need to look at a solution to getting these guys to be held accountable. It's just, to me, that's the real issue going on here, because we're forcing mom and pops out. They're selling at a premium price. The new guys are coming in and they're just trying to cover out their operating expenses. That's forcing rents up. To protect the mom and pops, they supply the bulk of affordable housing. And what we're doing right now is we're really talking about a lot of periphery issues, when the real problem is we can't bring these bad actors to justice. So I'm a property owner advocate and suggesting I want to work with your committee to get these guys in front of the judge, because we really need a lapse of time eviction. Because again, the tenants don't want to testify against another tenant in court. I had to have that happen once. It wound up in a street brawl in
3
front of the
minutes are up,
property.
and your time has expired. Do you mind summarizing?
Sure, no problem. So again, expanding the lapse of time protections doesn't make sense. It's the last tool in the landlord's toolbox to use when you've got a tenant that's on 100% subsidy and is creating a havoc in your property. Landlords do not evict tenants for no reason. And I really strongly suggest we don't try to push 143, but we work together to find a solution to bring absentee out-of-state landlords to our justice system so the tenants are happy. And
Thank
that
you.
would be my testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Next is April Conquest.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, April.
Hi, how are you, everyone?
Good, thank you.
Okay, let me start. Shoot, you still there? Oh my
Sure,
God.
April. I
Oh,
can't
okay.
see you, but I can hear you fine.
Okay, that's fine. I am Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the Housing Committee. Proposed bill SB 143 and HB 5156 in opposition. My name is April R. Conquest. I'm a housing provider. I work for Vesta Corporation, and I'm a member of CTAA. Senator Moore, I am also one of your constituents. I have been providing housing for over 20 years. I have housed thousands of people, including, but not limited to, seniors, Section 8 participants, public housing participants, etc. You name it, I've seen it. I want to walk you through a day in the life of a property manager. My day involves resolving numerous work orders, walking the property to ensure the health and safety of our residents, responding to tours requests, renewing application qualifications, income background checks, showing prospective residents their new home, and finally, the best part, providing keys to their new home. I know many of my residents by name. There is a rental increase each year to offset the cost of the upkeep of the property, including taxes, insurance, maintenance, as well as community resident events. Whatever rental increases I receive go back to the residents and the property. I oppose SB 143 because it would fundamentally alter the relationship between me and my residents, meaning a lease is a contract with a mutual agreed upon start and end date, and this bill violates one of the most fundamental property rights, which is the right of control. By control, I do not mean controlling the whims of my residents' daily lives, but controlling and managing the property in a way that maintains the property in its highest and best use, which benefit my residents and my community. Many communities are still setting up their fair rent commissions. Let's give the positive legislation passed last year time to settle. Thank you very much. April Conquest.
Thank you, April. I remember meeting with you with
Yes.
CTAA, that you were one of the people that I talked to. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is Stefan Keller. Sophia Wang.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Sophia, thank you.
Yes, so I will start my testimony now. Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Sophia Wang, and I'm a PhD candidate in political science at Yale University. I was a resident of New Haven for 4 years. I'm currently traveling abroad for my research. I'm in London now, so it's actually 4 a.m. for me. And I just want to say a few words before I share my experiences with the housing court. I want to express my support for Senate Bill 143, and I also want it to be strengthened to cover 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are renter occupied. I want to tweak my written testimony a little bit because I want to quickly make 2 points. So first, we heard a lot of conversations about the increasing affordable housing supply or just housing supply in general will solve the problem. But that's no silver bullet, because I want to bring up a recent study in political science that actually shows that newly built affordable housing units in San Francisco gentrify nearby neighborhoods and raise rental and property prices. And the second point I want to make and reiterate to this body is to say that today we're presented with a lot of stories, statistics, and overall, but it's really not about what values we believe in, how loud or often we speak. It's really about democracy and political representation. Today, we're hearing a story from both sides of the aisle, but just from a simple fact that we know there are more renters than landlords. By how many those landlords are telling us their property are, we know that there are more renters behind those units. And they're not just numbers, those are lives. And I want to talk to this body about saying, we're hearing a lot of those landlords mentioning the safety of the renters living in their units, but precisely we're not seeing enough renters testifying about those safety concerns about their fellow neighbors. We're only hearing a few of them, but they are not represented by the mainstream from our renters that are worried about retaliatory evictions that's not supported by just cause eviction. So I will share a little bit of my own experience at housing court. So I find it very fascinating to hear about landlords saying they don't really want to prove to their accountability to share more about providing just cause to disclose why they want to evict tenants. For myself, I voluntarily moved out of my apartment in May 2022 because the landlord telling me that they are going to build another unit in the backyard, and we have a dog and we build a fence and we don't want that. So myself, after moving out, I actually found out that the landlord illegally withheld about $800 of my rental deposit. I took him to court. I served the writ in September 2022. And because of some errors I made, I reserved it and had my default judgment in April 2023. Throughout the time, it was very hard to navigate this whole legal system as an immigrant moving to New Haven, although I have been there for a couple of years. The learning curve was very steep, but thanks to the help of City Connecticut Legal Clinic and support from the clerks of the housing sessions, I was able to go through and get my judgment. However, the landlords refused to pay me any money after their payment date. So I will wrap up by saying what happens after. So in September last year, I actually got the financial execution papers done, but because I'm traveling for research, I was not able to get through it and hand it to a marshal until early January when I was back to the department to give a talk. So I'm still waiting for the landlord to pay me back for like a judgment that happened last year, but the whole process started in September. I just want to mention that as the same as building affordable housing supplies, this whole process takes so much time. I think this body really needs to pass this bill of Senate Bill 143 right now with the extension to 1 to 4 multifamily buildings by considering the lives and the well-being of the renters right now. Thank you, and I really welcome any questions directed to me about my housing court experience.
Thank you. So it's 4 a.m. where you are, huh?
Yeah, close to 5.
Are you up for the rest of the day?
Luckily, I only have another meeting till 3 p.m., so maybe I can get some rest.
All right, take care. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next is Teresa Quintana.
Yes. Good evening, Senator Moore and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Teresa Quintana. I am Manchester resident. I work for the Road, Connecticut, and I support SB 143, an act relating to just cause evictions, but would like to see it strengthened to cover 1 to 4 families, except those that are owner-occupied. When I arrived in this country more than 20 years ago, I experienced many injustices. I live in an apartment inhabited with cockroach and rats, with old and damp carpets in the rooms of the top floor, the hottest and on the summers and the coldest in the winter. I remember being without heat more than a dozen times. We have to cover ourselves with all the clothes and blankets we had at home to withstand the cold. I signed a rental contract, but I never received a copy, and it was only available in English. I didn't speak English on those times. I was just a Spanish speaker. I never knew what my rights were as a tenant, but I paid my rent on time, and I had a very good relationship with my neighbors. It was fine at the time because the only things that matters at the time was to have a roof over my head. I think that as immigrants, we all arrive thinking the same things, and the owners take advantage of our basic needs. I had hope that things might have improved after so many years, but instead, I hear the same story every day in my community. As a housing organizer in Make the Road, Connecticut, I have walked step by step by the tenants of our community so that they can apply the law that should be implemented at the municipal level. And while we traveled this path, we found neighbors with disability who lived in a 3-family housing for over 16 years and was told by the new owner of his building that he needed to leave because they could rent it out for $800 more than what he was paying. Without a rental contract, it was easy to kick him out of the home without considering his disability and the fact that he had 2 children in special education. I am completely tired of hearing that our community is subject to the abuse and dehumanization of homeowners just because landlords don't want to be regulated. If you don't care to consider the right and quality of life of your tenants, find another job. Because if they only do it to fill their pocket with more money, they are inhumane. Housing is a human right. The way current Connecticut law is subjecting working class tenants to such oppression is abhorrent. When the landlord say that evicting tenant is expensive for them, it is a lie. They charge tenants for the lawyer's fee if they aren't compliant. Where is the freedom in working hard every day only to have to fight for our basic human rights? We are trying to ignore the fact that the law needs to be updated as America changes. Predatory landlords have been using all the old-fashioned law to deny dignified housing to their tenants. And
Your
it is
3 minutes
time
are up, and your
to
time has
listen to the
expired.
people,
Can you please summarize?
sure, who are speaking up about the oppressive techniques that their landlords use to evict people from their homes without reason. Of course, all the landlords who came today claim to be a good landlords, but if they are good landlords, they will be supporting what make it possible for people to live decent lives, and that is extensions of SB 143. Black renters in Connecticut are over 3 times more likely than white renters to have evictions, and Hispanic, Latina renters, especially women, are over 2 times more likely to face evictions than white renters. For the reason I strongly support Senate Bill 143 and Act concerning eviction for cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Alexander Spicer.
Hello, yes, that's correct. Thank you. Dear Representative Khan, Senator Moore, and members of the Housing Committee, my name is Alex Spicer. I am a homeowner and resident in New Haven. I'm a public school teacher in the wealthy suburbs of Fairfield County, and my own children attend the New Haven Public Schools. As a canvasser with Connecticut Tenants Union, I have spoken to hundreds of renters around New Haven about their housing situations. I support Senate Bill 143, an act concerning evictions for cause, but I want it to be strengthened to cover 1 through 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. We need this policy that already protects older residents in Connecticut so that it applies universally, and especially to families with children. As a homeowner, I can raise my family with the incredible benefits of housing security. That security has not only allowed me to put down roots in New Haven, but encouraged me to do so. My kids can feel confident that they will not be uprooted from their schools, but my kids' friends who rent from the landlords in town, they live in fear of displacement. That lack of security impairs their learning in every way, both academic skills like learning to read and to solve math problems, and also to developing healthy social and emotional lives. Evictions are traumatic, and the legislature needs to face that reality. I teach in a wealthy district where almost everyone can take their housing security for granted, and I see every day how much it helps kids come to school ready to learn. Everyone deserves the benefits of being a homeowner, and everyone benefits when all residents have housing security. Almost nothing is more beneficial to Connecticut as a whole than stable communities where people feel safe, secure, and can plan for the future. A thriving Connecticut begins when its residents can be confident that they can stay in their homes. I also want to tell you what I've heard talking to renters in New Haven. Over and over again, I have talked to tenants so desperate to maintain their housing that they fear reporting unhealthy living conditions to their landlords. They live with mold, pests, crumbling walls and ceilings and staircases, sinks that flood, and boarded up windows. They live with smoke detectors constantly beeping because the landlords are not bothering to do even the most basic maintenance required. Tenants tough it out when the heat is broken because it's better than sleeping outside. If the renters complain, they fear that the landlord will find someone even more desperate to take their place. It's a race to the bottom because the power balance is tilted so heavily towards the landlords. Just cause protections are necessary for everyone, just so that tenants feel safe asking the landlords to uphold their end of a lease. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, sir. Next is Will Kruger. Joelle Fishman. Joelle?
Yes, here I am. Good
Hello.
evening, Senator Moore and committee. I'm trying to get my, excuse me. All right. I'll use the paper one. My name is Joelle Fishman. I live in New Haven. I'm testifying on behalf of the Connecticut Communist Party, also part of Connecticut for All, in support of expanding just cause eviction protections. I support SB 143 and that concerning evictions for cause, and urge that it be strengthened to include 1 to 4 multifamily buildings, except those that are owner occupied. The ability to have a stable place to call home is shrinking away for thousands of hardworking people, including families with children whose education is being disrupted as a result. Since the pandemic, investment firms have been gobbling up properties in my city and in cities across the state. They have no interest in the renters. They're only looking at maximizing profits. They're quick to issue eviction notices to tenants who pay their rent and keep up the property so they can make a few cosmetic repairs and then hike the rents exorbitantly for the next family. Thank goodness for the Connecticut Tenants Union that's organizing renters to protect their homes and their rights. And thank goodness for actions the legislature has taken to require fair rent commissions in every town and require legal counsel to renters in housing court. But more protections are needed. Expanding the just cause eviction law that's already on the books for elderly and disabled to cover all renters is very much needed. It will prevent families from crisis and homelessness and will hold mega landlords accountable. Just cause eviction protections have been proven to significantly reduce evictions in the 5 states and 12 cities where it has been enacted. It's an important component to addressing the housing crisis. Expanding just cause eviction protection is also a step toward racial equity. The housing crisis is disproportionately hurting people of color and single moms. Black and Latino renters face eviction at 2 and 3 times higher rates. Connecticut cities have the highest eviction rates. In New Haven, where I live, 1,769 families faced eviction last year. I'm a homeowner now, but for most of my life, I was a renter. And yes, I was a victim to at-will eviction. It's devastating for the family. It's also devastating for the entire community. Bold action on behalf of all renters is urgently needed. Putting the brakes on the ability of mega landlords to evict without just cause and to increase the rents in between tenants would go a long way toward creating some stability. Ultimately, bigger solutions will be needed to guarantee decent, affordable housing as a human right. It's incumbent on the legislature to expand just cause eviction protections to all renters in this session. And in this session, please expand the just cause protection to every renter by supporting and strengthening SB 143. And I thank you so much for your leadership, Senator Moore.
Thank you, Joelle. Next is Jamie Myers McPhail. Adam Bonoff. Teresa Eck.
I'm here. Adam Bonoff is
okay.
here.
Are you Adam?
I am.
Hi, Adam.
Hi there. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Senator Moore, honorable members of the Housing Committee. My name's Adam Bonoff. I've been a landlord in Connecticut for over 20 years. I stand in opposition of SB 143, and I do so, because I don't really want to reiterate everything that was said tonight by every other property manager or landlord, because, but one thing that really struck me is that nobody has really talked about for-cause evictions. Why do we see none of them or almost none of them? And the reason is because it's very, very difficult to prove. Am I going to bring a bag of smoke to the courthouse? Am I going to bring all the loud noise that's going on in the building? Am I going to be able to figure out, who the drug dealer, where the drug dealer is hiding the drugs? Am I going to be able to get the tenant who is being harassed or bullied by the bad actor in the building? I mean, I've had situations where I've had multifamily buildings, and these types of situations have occurred, and landlords actually don't have a lot of legal power. We're not police officers. We can't, step in and get rid of people, just throw them out the door. It's really not possible, and it's really not easy to prove. And landlords are, you might not say that they're victims, but they are victims of eviction, almost, at least financially, compared to tenants. I mean, landlords lose tens of over $10,000 in an eviction is not unheard of at all. And, they're not in business to lose money. It's a last resort for a landlord to go to that step and actually have to file an eviction, whether it's, for cause or with, a lapse of time. But taking this away is going to hurt the tenants that are living on these multifamily properties. They're going to become the victims as much as landlords are, for losing the opportunity, losing the power to be able to make the moves they need to make to control the building as best they can. Most landlords want to run a business that is ethical. They want to run a business that, people are getting what they're paying for. I just think you're really handcuffing and also you're adding cost all these processes that, these new proposals and all these things just add cost, and also deny access to people getting new housing, or being able to move around and have mobility in housing. All these things, they have consequences. It's not a one-way thing. It sounds, like every tenant that was on all day today is just a marvelous, wonderful tenant. And, anybody should be so happy to have them. Well, it may or may not be so. I mean, the other thing is, being in business, you want,
3 minutes are
not
up.
every
Time has
relationship
expired. Can you please summarize?
Okay, not every relationship that you have with somebody or that you've done business with has been the greatest. A lot of them could have been strained. Why do you need to have to always, you're forced in a situation where you've got to continue to work with somebody that, hey, maybe it would be better if this relationship is over. I could more easily divorce my wife than I could getting rid of a tenant that I don't want to deal with anymore. I mean, it's really kind of psycho, to think that we need to live like
Okay.
that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity. If anybody has any questions, I understand it's late.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Next is Teresa Eck. Greta Blau. Louis Luna. Hi, Louis.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Luis Luna. I am a resident of New Haven, Connecticut, and the coalition manager for Husky for Immigrants. I am also a renter. I support Senate Bill 143. I'm here today to share my perspective on the importance of this bill, particularly for undocumented individuals and marginalized communities growing up. Growing up in an undocumented household, I have witnessed firsthand the struggles and vulnerabilities that come with trying to secure stable housing without the necessary documentation or financial resources. Undocumented individuals, like many in my community, often face insurmountable barriers when it comes to accessing fair housing. Without a social security and a credit history, undocumented people are disproportionately targeted by predatory landlords who take advantage of this reality. This leaves undocumented communities at the mercy of arbitrary rent hikes, unjust evictions, and exploitative living conditions. The passage of just cause eviction is not just a matter of policy, it's a matter of basic human dignity and social justice. By safeguarding tenants against unjust evictions, this will provide much needed stability and security for undocumented individuals and families across our state. It will ensure that we are not forced into homelessness or further pushed into the shadows due to circumstances beyond our control. Moreover, the impact of just cause extends beyond the individual level to the broader community. Studies have shown that states and cities with similar protections have experienced significant decreases in displacement and homelessness. By preventing arbitrary evictions, this legislation will help stabilize neighborhoods, preserve communities, and promote economic resilience. Furthermore, it is essential to recognize the disproportionate impact of housing insecurity on marginalized communities. Black and Hispanic Latina renters in Connecticut are already overrepresented among those facing eviction, exacerbating existing inequities and systemic injustices. Just cause eviction protection represents a crucial step towards addressing disparities and advancing equity within our housing systems. I urge you to support Senate Bill 143 and stand with undocumented renters and marginalized communities in our fight for housing justice. By enacting this legislation, we begin to create a more just and inclusive society where everyone, regardless of immigration status or background, has the right to safe, affordable, and dignified housing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Louis. Jennifer Paradis.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I thought I was going to be the person, Senator Moore, to say good morning to you, but I'm one person, one person off. I'll be the last to say good evening then. And thank you. All my gratitude to you and Representative Khan, and all the distinguished members of the Housing Committee for this very long day. My name is Jennifer Paradis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Bethel Center in Milford, Connecticut, and I'm a resident of Hamden, Connecticut. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today and provide some general comments around SB 145 and SB 143. The chronic underfunding of our homeless response system is now destructive. Since 2021, the number of people experiencing homelessness has increased by 14% year over year. This increase, coupled with the lack of resources, has resulted in nearly 940 people sleeping outdoors tonight, right now, with no place to turn. Not because homeless service providers don't know what to do, but because we need more funds to do so. Today, Bethel is operating a 34-bed emergency shelter program, although we are only funded for 18 beds. We have 20 plus people working in our winter shelter program, coming to our winter shelter program nightly, although we are only funded for 15. We made 48,000 meals out of funding for 30,000, and we absorbed 75% of an increase in demand for diversion services. Many of those inquiries coming from those who are homeless for the first time in their lives. We have outstanding partners and leaders in Department of Housing and DEMAS, but we need everyone pushing in the same direction. We need all of you to support the crisis response, as well as invest in the housing development across the state. I want to use my remaining time here to really talk about the investment that you're making. There was a hearing on Friday. There were a lot of questions on what is the homeless response system? What is case management? And I thought the best way to really depict the work that we do is around the training that our staff receive. Every person who was employed at Bethel and many of the other programs across the state is trained in overdose prevention and Narcan, domestic violence prevention and response, human trafficking, mental health first aid, CPR, AED, bloodborne pathogens, motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, housing first principles, employment readiness, benefit support, fair housing policy, as well as a case manager, you have to understand employment, transportation, childcare, healthcare, and food resources that meet the unique challenges of every case that you see. These are folks that are making minimum wage today, $15.69 an hour, and many of them are working 2 to 3 jobs and also qualify for the same services that are trying to build their careers around. So you are investing in the solutions to homelessness by investing in us. National studies found that through Housing First services plus subsidies, you save $6,307 per household and nearly $10,000 for those highly vulnerable clients in our system. I heard earlier on today, because I've been with you all day here, that you are putting forward a bill that includes the $20 million in the various key areas of our system that we're requesting immediate support in. Yes, I will summarize. And so thank you so much for that support. Lastly, I would like to include my support for just cause evictions, SB 143. We walked back the cases that came into the center last year to understand how many of those cases, those literal homeless cases, could have been supported earlier on and prevented even through a bill like S 143, and it turned out that nearly half of those folks who were evicted and in shelters or in our programs the next day could have been supported by a bill like this. You are doing the work that you think you are doing in stopping nearly 11% of the evictions across the state. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Well, now we can say good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Ruth Gowervich. Sasha Rivera. Ronald Barba. Ronald, you are mute.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to first acknowledge the long hours that you put in. There are some, I'm not entirely in support of many of the things that have been discussed here today in the proposed legislation, but I do celebrate the fact that you work as hard as you do, and I do appreciate that as a taxpayer, and it deserves acknowledgement. My name is Ronald Barba, and I am the managing partner of Bender, Anderson and Barba PC, which is located in North Haven, Connecticut. Bender, Anderson and Barba is a common interest community law firm representing around 400 community associations around the state of Connecticut, and we've been doing that since 1986. And we also do represent a lot of housing providers in the landlord-tenant area. I'm here today largely to express my opposition to HB 5152 as it pertains to prohibiting common interest communities from enacting and enforcing restrictions that limit the number of rental units to less than 50%. I think that while it probably is an interesting idea to protect, or at least to provide a greater number of rental units to the residents and the citizens of Connecticut, it does have some very deleterious effects that I'm not sure that were contemplated. These sort of unanticipated consequences. Right now, the limitation is 50% because that comports with the underwriting guidelines of institutional lenders that make loans to people that buy condominiums and the like. Also, those institutions that purchase those loans, like Fannie Mae, they set that limit at 50% for a very good reason. That because when you get above that number, when you start to have more rental units than you do owner-occupied units, those communities become less viable financially and otherwise. And allowing more than 50% of the units to be rented in a community really does lead to issues beyond the fact that you exceed the underwriting guidelines of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the like. What you do is you create a situation where you have a less invested residency or community, as is very often the case. Insurance premiums for the association go up as there is some correlation between high rental rates and the risk. Also, it becomes increasingly difficult for owners to either refinance or to sell their units, as those the ability to get financing for these from conventional or otherwise lenders becomes harder and harder. They just don't want to lend money to high rental rate communities. So there really are a number of difficulties that are raised when you prevent, or when you look to prevent, associations from controlling the number of rentals they want in any particular facility. And oddly enough, communities want to lower the rental percentages to protect against the sort of predatory landlords that have been talked about.
Your time has expired. Do you mind summarizing, please?
I will. When these renters have a disparate control over the associations, they control the governance, they control the finances, and owner-occupied units become disenfranchised. So I speak in opposition of that. I also submitted my written testimony in opposition to the other raised measures, 143 and the like. And I ask that the Assembly please take those into consideration. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you for that testimony. We've heard something similar earlier that we'll be discussing, so thank you. Next is Mari Camacho, Sarah Pavone, Brian Wallace, Luke Melankakis Harrison, all right, Luke, you're gonna pronounce your name correctly for me and not hold it against me?
Of course not.
Okay.
Luke Melanakos Harrison. Good evening, Housing Committee. It has been honestly a pleasure to spend the whole day with you hearing so many stories. My name is Luke. I'm a renter and a resident of New Haven. I'm the Vice President and Political Director of Connecticut's first, only, and proudest statewide union of tenants. Our push for Just Cause HB 143 did not come out of thin air. As the political director of my union, my job is to translate the experiences, needs, and priorities of my members into smart and strategic policy proposals. We're pushing Just Cause this year because it is exactly that. It's good, smart policy grounded in real experiences of our grassroots movement. I want to quickly touch on a couple of recurring themes we've heard over and over today. Number one, this question about housing conditions. Renters have not logged on to or showed up to the hearing today to tell you about the poor conditions in their buildings just because they're airing their grievances. Rather, they are pointing out something that is extremely key to understand. Safe and healthy conditions are deeply and inextricably connected to just cause eviction protections. Why would you call code enforcement knowing that your landlord can evict you 6 months later without having to cite a reason for it? Why would you file a complaint with the Fair Rent Commission knowing that they can only keep your rent down for 12 months, and at the end of that 12 months, your landlord can file lapse of time eviction against you to jack up the rent for the next tenant? If those things are not prevented via just cause, our existing systems of code enforcement, fair rent commissions, and other tenant protections are thin and difficult for tenants to access because they know that they can be retaliatory evicted. And it's important to understand that the current law against retaliation has a 6-month limit. After that 6 months, that is no longer a defense that you can use against eviction. You've heard from tenant after tenant today that retaliation and discrimination is happening under this guise of no-fault evictions. What landlords have been saying is, well, we need no-fault evictions because it's too difficult to prove in court. What that sounds like to us is we don't want the accountability of needing to settle a dispute in court. What we have in our society right now to settle disputes between two parties is the court system. You go to court to have both sides show their evidence and make their case. When landlords are saying we don't want to have to do that, they're saying we want the personal and private discretion to have total control over who's in and who's out, which again is a massive cover for retaliation and discrimination. You didn't hear anyone come up here and say we use evictions for retaliation, because of course they're not going to say that in a public hearing, but you've heard from tenant after tenant saying that that's happening to them. So I would urge you to take that very seriously. We've also heard that tenants are being displaced en masse due to this predatory business strategy that is causing enormous personal and social suffering in our communities, and that has simply not been addressed by the opposition today. Instead of continuing to debunk misinformation from the other side, however, I want to just agree with previous testifiers who have pointed out that in the midst of the housing and homelessness crisis that we are facing, expanding a law we've already had on the books for 40 years that simply requires that evictions be for cause is an incredibly moderate proposal. Last year, hundreds and hundreds of us
3
kept
minutes
you up.
are up. Do you mind summarizing real quick?
Yep.
Thank you.
We kept you up all night, 2 hearings in a row, asking for regulations on rent caps. We decided not to do that kind of mass mobilization this year and instead focus on our tenant union organizing. And yet, despite that, here we still are at midnight. And the reason is because tenants are demanding to be heard on these issues. They are seeking significant change. And I hope that this hearing has made the widely felt nature of this issue abundantly clear. In closing, I just want to offer a reflection, which is that tenant landlord law does raise a lot of existential questions. Does someone who has never set foot on a property really have more of a right to it than someone who has had community relationships, memories, and an entire life lived in the 4 walls of their apartment? Beyond everything else, that's what we're getting at when we're touching on this question of evictions for cause. So I urge you all to support this legislation with enthusiasm, and I do sincerely thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks for hanging in there with us, too. Elizabeth Rosenthal. All right, we've gone through the list. We do have some people who have come back, and we'll let them know if they're still here.
We also have Manny Sandoval. He wasn't on this, but he's on there, so you can go. And then
Good morning, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, ranking members of the Housing Committee. My name is Manuel Sandoval. I'm a ACLU Smart Justice leader in support of SB 143. Please note that my original statement has been submitted. I've been listening here all day, and I want to respond to a couple of things. First, no one is out to remove the rights of the landlord. I'm a landlord myself, and I would not want to do that. What we're saying is to remove the abusive tactics implemented by corporations and affluence in the name of profit. Second, I heard statements against profits and capitalism. Homelessness in America is nearly doubled since COVID. In Central Connecticut alone, 18 people died last year due to homelessness. Since January 1st, 2024, I know 3 people that have actually passed. I'm an outreach worker as well. This is unacceptable. What we would say is acceptable is reasonable profit margin, fair profit margin, and a touch of humanity and kindness. I'm not against profits or capitalism, but I am against exploitation of the most vulnerable population. Also mentioned was oversight causing government housing instead of free enterprise, when in reality, legislative oversight will protect people from the corporations and the greed that's currently destroying the fabric of families and neighborhoods today. People also complained about entitlement, while corporations are using these entitlements and subsidies in addition to profiting from people with caring and well-being. If this is wrong, if I'm wrong, then why is it that corporate CEOs are making 300 to 500 times the earnings of their lowest paid workers when they used to make 30 to 50 times their lowest paid workers 40 to 60 years ago? It's all because we're worrying too much about profits and not about people. Lastly, I heard a landlord say that they wanted to remove someone because of a fire that they caused. I would dare to say that the landlord had their insurance on their property, while tenants most likely didn't. I know for a fact because I had a displacement in my home from my tenant, and me having a heart, I actually put them up for 1 week in a place where I didn't have to do that, but I did that because, again, it has to do with being human, kindness and human, right? So again, I support SB 143, and I ask one thing too. For those that opposed it, please do not negate the pain and suffering and trauma from those who testified today. Just because you have not experienced their pain does not mean that they're not going through it. All right. We ask for empathy and compassion. All right. When you're hearing these things. So again, I also support SB 145. Connecticut's facing an unprecedented surge in homelessness, so we have to strengthen and stabilize the homelessness response system. And it's been a long night. Thank you for waiting for me. And I was gonna say take the rest of the night off, but unfortunately, I guess there's people online.
You don't get that privilege tonight.
No, I guess not.
Someone else is waiting in the room.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
No?
Do you have a question? No, there's no questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, there are 4 people in the attendees. You should have been sent a request to be a panelist. So if you would like to speak, you have to accept it. I know there were some that did not accept the first time. They're still in the queue. So we have sent all 4. I believe there's 4. So as they come into the panelists, then we can call on them. But if they do not accept the panelist invitation, unfortunately, they will not be able to speak. So I see Olivia Rinkus. Olivia?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you to the Housing Committee for the opportunity to testify. My name is Olivia Rinkus from the town of North Stonington, Connecticut. I'm also an undergraduate student at the University of Connecticut. I'm testifying today in support of SB 143, an act concerning evictions for cause. I believe this bill could go further by including multifamily homes of 1 to 4 units, with the exception of owner-occupied properties. To address the landlords in here who believe that it is too difficult or not their responsibility to provide evidence for the need to evict someone, this is someone's literal home we're talking about. Whether it's owned or rental, housing is a human right, and we're experiencing a housing crisis in Connecticut and in the United States. Protection from evictions for no cause is the most basic protection. As a non-home owner in Connecticut, I have never experienced an eviction, but I don't want to live in fear of the possibility that it can happen at any time with no warning and for no reason. Access to safe, secure, affordable housing is a fundamental part of the health of a community. Property rights might be an important part of the fabric of our society, but this bill isn't asking landlords to give up their properties. It's merely asking landlords to give a cause for eviction. We've heard a lot tonight about the issue of perpetual tenancy, which just blows my mind, because in what way is a rental property being rented an issue for the landlord who manages this property for the express purpose of renting it? The disconnect here has been real, with landlords who believe that an eviction means someone needs to get a better job or move somewhere else, and not a life-changing, damaging, lasting impacts on a person's life. This protection is necessary to protect against the bad actor landlords, especially the large out-of-state corporate developments who are raising going rates of rents around Connecticut for the last several years, and to protect from retaliation, racism, and other forms of discriminatory treatment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Okay, so in attendees, Kirk Carr, you, and William Roberts. Okay, looks like they did not accept the panelist invitation. We do have somebody in person, Carlos Martinez. You will be our last speaker for the day.
All right. How you doing, Senator Moore, Representative Khan, Representative Scott, and Representative Brown? My name is Carlos Martinez Rivera. Right now, I live at 252 Simpson Avenue in Hartford, but I've been a long resident of 24 years in the town of East Hartford on Burnside Avenue. My first story began with my apartment catching on fire March 28th of 2023 due to my landlord having faulty electricity. Thank God I had renter's insurance because, you know, that's the thing that you need to have to protect yourself. So my landlord tried to sue my renter's insurance saying that it was my fault, but through my being an advocate, advocating on the behalf of myself, I told my renter's insurance to hire an investigator. The investigator find out that it wasn't my fault, that it was the landlord's fault. So they cut the landlord's lawsuit. Now I live on Simpson Avenue. A company called RFW Holdings LLC. I gave my money, my security deposit, plus my rent to the superintendent at that apartment. In the middle of transporting the money from the super to the landlord, somehow my money got lost. Yesterday, I came home from taking care of my 85-year-old grandmother that also lives on Simpson Avenue. As I came home, a marshal left a letter of a notice to quit, telling me that I have to vacate my premises on one of the most wonderful days of my life, which is my birthday on February 28th. I will be turning 41 years old on that day. So instead of celebrating my born day, I will have to celebrate one of the most horrible days of my life. I am in support of SB 143, a bill that will support legal rights for tenants like me that are trying to be good tenants, and these corporations and these LLCs are taking advantage of us by saying that we never give them the money. I am a very honest person. I'm always advocating. You could talk to Representative Walker. You could talk to Representative Curry, to Representative Rojas. They will tell you I am a very big advocate. I'm always here at the LLB or the Capitol advocating for me and the behalf of other people with mental health and concurrent disorders. So I wanted to know if you guys would support SB 143 because it will protect people like me and other people that are residents of Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Gonzalez, I think this question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much money was security deposit?
Well, the security deposit was 1,100 and then another 1,100 for the first month of rent. So it was $2,200 in total that was lost.
So they evicted you because they said that you didn't pay.
Well, the thing is now with these landlords, they have this loophole. So when they go to a judge or they go in front of their lawyers, if they will say to the lawyer, we are evicting this person because of the security deposit, the judge will never sign the notice to quit. So what they are doing now is saying because of non-payment of rent. So the loophole is non-payment of rent. instead of saying the truth and saying that it was because of the security deposit.
Do you have the receipt for the security deposit?
Yes, I have the receipt from the security deposit. I also have the receipt from RF Holdings LLC that they emailed to me and my brother with the $2,200 included, the 1,100 and the 1,100 from February.
Okay, what's the address, your address again?
252 Simpson Avenue, apartment C1 in Hartford.
252. They have, I think they got a bad history about not providing the tenants what they need.
Yes.
Right. Do you
Right.
have a problem?
Right now, I've been 2 months without a fridge and without a stove. If it wasn't because of my grandmother that lives at Shepherd Park Apartments, which is right around the corner from 252 Simpson, and her providing us food or us going to Subway or us going to a restaurant, which costs higher money. If it wasn't for that, we would be going hungry and we would have been like starving.
Okay. Other than coming here, did you went to housing court or?
Well, other than coming here, I contact the new task force that Mayor Arulin appointed, which is the bad landlord problems task force. And I got a hold of Representative Rosario, I think it's Rosario. Councilperson Rosario, which she contact the landlord and is making the landlord come from New Jersey on Thursday to take care of the situation.
Do you have any conversation with the landlord?
Yes, today we had a conversation with the landlord. He told me to call him back at 2:00. When I called him at 2:00, the property manager, Lisa, picked up and was acting like she was the landlord. And she was saying, oh, we don't want to take care of the problem. Have a nice day, and hung up in my face.
So eventually you believe that the city council woman is gonna help you?
I don't know what is going to happen on Thursday, but they called the landlord and the landlord said that he was coming from New Jersey at 12:00 on Thursday, and it's going to be her, the fire marshal's office, the building inspector, and it's going to be another person there. So I don't know if the task force is going to be able to help me with the situation, but according to Miss Kelly, which is her assistant, she said that the landlord cannot kick me out due to the superintendent losing the security deposit.
Well, keep a fight. I think this is, and that's the problem that we faced, not only Hartford, but it's all over. You know, I do have a story of my own. When I came from PR with my 3 kids, I was positive in cancer. And I went to rent an apartment. And I was at that time, I was so sick. I was going through cancer. So I was a welfare mom. And I rent this apartment. And I remember the owners, they sold the building to this new landlord. And I remember the landlord came to my house, knocked the door, and I thought that he was coming for the rent. So I have the money order, and I said, I went and I got the money order, and I said, hey, the rent. He said, oh, no, I'm not coming for the rent. I just want to let you know that if you be nice to me, you don't have to pay the rent, or maybe I can lower the rent. So I said, just give me 1 second. 1 second. I went to the bedroom. I got a bat, a big bat that we have. And I came out and I said, can you repeat that? So he went running all the way down the hallway. I went after him. And he never came back to the building. But those are the problems. And that's why I really identify myself with all the people that comes here, that they got problems in housing, because I went through that. As a welfare mom, I was so sick, and I went through all those problems. And I know that that's why, you know, there are some landlords, because I'm not going to say all the landlords, but there are some landlords that take advantage and they abuse people.
Yes.
So I know that as Bill 143 will help a lot of people. I
Yes.
think that we got to do some changes.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Thank you,
Yes,
Representative Moore. Thank you, Representative Scott. And thank you, Mrs. Gonzalez.
So we do have William Roberts that is online, so he will be our last speaker, and I hope I don't speak too soon again. Mr. Roberts.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, it's been a long day. I was at the Capitol early this morning. I came immediately after work. Went home, fell asleep, and I'm currently back at work. But to go back to why I'm here. I am in support of SB 143. One of the reasons why is my neighbors who I have known for well over 5 years. We've been living in the same apartment complex, and they received a time-lapse eviction notice last month. They are currently, they live together. They have 2 kids together. They're very low income. And they were scrambling to find a reason why they were getting evicted. They had no concept of what was even going on. I had to help them navigate the process through Hartford Legal Aid. And even so, right now, they're actually going to court, and it's really stressing them now. So I can honestly say that even though they paid rent on time, they have done nothing wrong with the building. Even though the building is in really bad shape, they're still getting kicked out. And the main reason why is because property managers from New York came, called Noble Management. They came over, they bought a whole bunch of complexes from a lot of previous landlords. And as soon as they bought it, they sent everybody rent raise renewal leases. So it's not necessarily just about the negotiations. They increased everybody's rent. Mine, they tried to increase from 860 to 1,050. At that time, I was only making minimum wage. I could not afford it. It was stressing me out. And I also had a fair rent commission hearing that was supposed to be coming up because my window leaks. It's been leaking for 2 years now. I went to the Fair Rent Commission hearing, and the landlord finally agreed to fix it. So this Thursday and Friday, they come. I have to be out of my apartment for 2 whole days with the agreement that they get to raise my rent $75. So I can honestly tell you that this apartment building that I'm living in is in really bad shape. It's been in bad shape for well over 2 years. The numerous complaints had been unresolved. Nothing gets done. We don't even have our washer and dryer. The room has been locked up. We don't even have access to that anymore. But back to the no cause eviction again. They are literally kicking out people who have been really good tenants, paid rent on time, don't cause any problems. So the myth that somehow, they're bad tenants, I can automatically squash
Your
that.
time has expired. Can you please summarize?
So my summarization is without these protections, and I would like to expand these protections to everybody because I know immediately right after that once they raise the rent, because my Fair Rent Commission hearing is over, it's only a matter of time before they send me this eviction letter too.
Thank you. There are no further questions and there are no further speakers. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thank you.